community in Tanzania than they are in Kenya.
In Kenya.
So these are realities that we live with. So you start from that reality and then push forward. And if you remember, in some of these border places, people move back and forth unhindered by what we call a border.
Right.
In fact, some of them may even wonder what it is you're talking about.
Because they're just leaving according to what
That's precisely what they do. People, you'll find somebody simply walks, as far as they're concerned, they're going to the next village. And yet they're going to the next country.
Yes, of course.
And it doesn't sort of like hit them. But it requires broader discussions and looking at the details and the history of some of these issues that have been there. But remember, whenever you have a problem with borders, we've had two places where border issues have always been a problem. The areas where you have the Pokot, and the reason is because the Pokot are predominantly pastoralists, and they move, and they have retained some of their traditions. So you'll find these traditions cause a lot of conflict. Now, if you look at the northern part of Kenya, the one thing that they've always complained about, marginalization. Now, back to the reality of politics. Why Raila brought ODM rebels back to the fold.
But before you go to that, CT, I mean, it was clear that the warning that came from President Uhuru Kenyatta was poignant. And he wasn't mincing words when he said on this Somali row that he was talking very clearly, of course, through the State House spokesperson, that this action amounts to an unwarranted attack by foreign soldiers, and said that Somalia was acting in a flagrant breach of Kenya's territorial integrity. So this we see as coming out very clear that it's not about coddling, it's not about soft diplomatic relations between the two states, but in this case it's a warning. Basically, don't do this because then you're going to provoke us, and then we're not going to be able to be held responsible for our actions.
Right, and this follows the clashes at the main border that happened as the Somalia troops apparently put pressure for the release of Jubaland Minister Abdi Nur, alias Abdi Hassan Janan, who is said to be in Mandera. Now, Janan reportedly arrived in Mandera on January the 30th and was booked in a local hotel after he escaped from a Mogadishu prison where he had been held since August 31st, 2019. So communication was cut in Mandera town for a better part of Monday as clashes went on in Bulahawa town, which is a few kilometers away from Kenya. Almost a dozen of Jubaland troops fled to Kenya in the clashes and were held at the local police station. So real stuff is happening on the ground.
Yes, but they came into Mandera.
Yes.
Okay, they had their issues. Remember, we touched on this and I said, we are getting caught up in ethnic clashes that actually clan clashes. Because the ethnicity is the same. Clan clashes. People come to Kenya. The police do what they should do. You are foreigners. You've come to our country. You are held.
Yes.
You see, being in a prison doesn't mean that you've done something, or just means you could be kept there for safety.
Right.
Yes, but
or just contained because we have no idea what you're up to.
Yes.
And you seemingly are fighting or in the middle of a fight. So,
clearly. And then the people who are pursuing them come into our borders. Of course, you know that's tantamount to an invasion.
Yeah.
It is. It is. Hence the warning that came out, and it was clear.
Right.
When I say we need to look into this, believe me, if there's one part of the country where you constantly hear of skirmishes and fights, it's that part of the country.
It's that part of the country.
And it's among clan. So-and-so took so-and-so's goats. The other ones retaliate. One person was killed. These are traditional ways in which people dealt with issues. Traditional.
Which cannot,
it can't go
work
on.
in
It
today's,
can't continue like this
even
in today's
remember
time
the
and
whole.
space.
If you look at it regionally, that area, the Horn of Africa, is usually really swept
volatile.
up on this types of thing. That's why we have Somaliland and Somalia, because they felt like, this is not how we're going to keep on, wrangling and having clan wars. So as we're going to separate, so that's why we have Somaliland towards the north, and then we have Somalia that obviously is still
and then we have
embroiled.
Jubaland.
And then we have Jubaland. And then we have Sudan.
So,
Right. Many lessons to be learned. CT, today's proverb probably will give us a way forward.
Yes, and it comes in very timely. Use your tongue to count your teeth.
I'm physically doing it right now.
yeah, it's impossible not to after you hear
After
that.
you hear that. Looking towards the unpackaging of that as we go along.
I'm willing to bet what it means, though.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'm not gonna say.
Are you
Put
betting,
your money where your mouth
are
is.
You
Okay.
betting? Are you betting in Kenya shillings, or is this one of these friendly?
$10.
Or in kind.
$10.
In
Yes.
kind.
That's 1,000 shillings.
Yes.
There's a reason why she said $10. When she said, no,
Dollars,
it's foreign
yes.
currency, my dear.
$10.
1,000 Kenya shillings.
That it means you need to keep. So I'm betting $10 that it means
Yes.
you need to keep your cards closer to your chest. Don't reveal your little plans because they might be ruined.
I think on a scale of 1 to 10, for just the sheer ingenuity of guessing,
Yeah.
I'll give you 8.
Okay.
Note for guessing.
For guessing.
guessing,
So
yeah.
to your 10, he'll raise you 8.
8. Okay.
Looking at the
Right.
front page of the Daily Nation, who is frustrating Kinoti's effort to fight corruption? On page 4, frustrated by what he claims to be the failure of the office of the DPP to charge suspects, the Director of Investigations goes on a war path. Maybe not as sensational as that, but interestingly enough, we see that he does go into some details and says, Haji has betrayed us, but we won't give up the fight, and this is what he has vowed. After a good run in the war against graft, the Director of Criminal Investigations, George Kinoti, says that his officers are frustrated and their morale has hit the lowest ebb of the cough of what happened yesterday. We feel betrayed after doing the donkey work, he said after a court drama in which the Director of Public Prosecutions, Mr. Nudin Haji, declined to change Kenya Ports Authority Managing Director, rather declined to charge Daniel Manduku. This is the first time that Mr. Kinoti, known for his tough talk, is complaining about the lack of progress in cases pending at the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. And he goes on to say, my worry is when suspects tell my officers, you are going nowhere.
Imagine
and
that.
then it comes to pass.
Yeah. And that points to that question that who is frustrating, because it seems these suspects seem no more to what is happening, and they feel
they
a
know
sense
it's
of
not happening.
being untouchable. Yeah, and therefore when it actually plays out in that way, then that question I feel is quite relevant. Who is protecting or frustrating those efforts against corruption? The DPP neither picked our calls, is what they say, and nor answered our text messages on whether his office is to blame for the low morale amongst investigating officers.
I mean, he goes through and further to say that he'll probably see then, after a while, a kind of lackluster attitude towards doing the job or carrying on further investigations, because they know that it's not going to go further.
Yeah.
His complaint.
But why is it that they're certain it won't go further?
Because of what they've seen previously and what they're currently dealing with,
no.
according to him.
Patterns,
The patterns,
City.
historical,
Yes,
over time.
but-
Whether
but-
his story is 3 months or 3 years, this is the pattern that they've
Yes.
seen.
When it rains, it means clouds have gathered. And we know that clouds gather because a certain process takes place, isn't it? Yes. And then
Except
they
when
get
the sun
dark.
is shining and the hippo is giving
Yes,
birth.
exactly. And when the clouds get heavy, they release the bird. Now, we call it rain, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, what is behind this particular rain? When you find cases going around in circles, 2 things. The office of the DPP may know something that the rest of us don't know and they can't tell us.
Of course.
The office of the DCI also knows something because they would. They are the detectives that also find these things out. But why is it that it's happening in KPA? Why is it that it's with this gentleman called Manduku? Remember the things he's being accused of, this one of late. This is chicken feed compared to what had been complained about earlier.
Yeah, but from
So
this,
who is Manduku's godfather? That is what I'm
Yeah,
asking.
that's the question. There are bigger names behind this.
Who
Yeah.
is
I
Manduku's
wouldn't
godfather?
imagine that he's actually acting on his own. They're obviously.
It begins
yeah.
with someone puts you there for a purpose. Yes.
KPA. We all know what KPA is to this country,
Yes.
and how much money would be at stake if someone was trying to grab.
You know, there is no competition
for
really.
themselves.
no,
yeah.
the monopoly, clearly.
Yes. And a very lucrative one. So it's not a question that's going to be easily answered. But when there's a back and forth and something which seems fairly obvious becomes complicated, it's being complicated.
It's going to open up. We want to see what the temperatures are around the world. In this case, what the weather looks like. We'll take a break and come back, and the conversation continues.
Spice FM, Malindi.
Mostly cloudy morning in Nairobi today at 16 degrees. We're going to see some rain later with highs of 26 and lows of 15. In Nyeri today, it's cloudy through most of the morning and the day with highs of 26 and lows of 14. What's happening in Kisumu at 19 degrees is mostly cloudy. Rain will come in later with highs of 29 and lows of 19. At 28 degrees in Malindi, it's cloudy conditions with highs of 32. Going into Nakuru at 16, it's cloudy conditions through the day. The sun will peak out at some point with highs of 27 and lows of 14. In Mombasa, it's cloudy conditions at 26 degrees, looking at a high of 32. In Eldoret this morning, 13 degrees and partly cloudy conditions through the day with highs of 24 and lows of 13. Into East Africa, in Kampala at 22 degrees, mostly cloudy conditions today. Expect rain later with highs of 26. In Dar es Salaam, it's cloudy conditions as well with highs of 31 and lows of 24. Expecting rain showers later. Taking a look into Lagos at 28 degrees, clear skies this morning. Rain expected with highs of 35 and lows of 27. In Johannesburg, all the way down south, it's clear skies as well. Partly cloudy conditions to follow later on with highs of 26 and lows of 12. Taking a look at New York, it's raining this morning. Light rain showers at 10 degrees with highs of 13 and lows of 4. And on into Europe, in Paris at 9 degrees, cloudy conditions, expecting some rain later with highs of 12 and lows of 4. And rounding things off in London this morning, cloudy skies at 6 degrees. Rain expected later with highs of 7 and lows of 1.
Are you ready? Okay. Spice FM. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM.
The biggest conversation in the country. This is the Situation Room. We are broadcasting live on KTN News. I am Trix Ingado, joining Siti Muga and Ndu Oko in reviewing the papers this morning just to see what has been prioritized today. And I would love to call our attention to the top story on The Standard. We are told this morning how Tuju gambled his billions. When I first saw this headline, I was shocked because it sounds a little bit off in terms of why this would be prioritized as the main story of the day, because I would have seen the first, the Somalia story. I would, if I was asked what would be the main story, it would be Kenya warns Somalia against aggression after the border war, then run from the recent,
especially since he's not the only individual, political or not, to have been in anything like this. So I mean, the question is, why then it being splashed in this manner? And then it takes 2 pages
and goes deep
and really deep into the detail.
Right.
So,
and the first line, just listen. Raphael Tuju, one of Kenya's biggest money politicians, is broke.
I mean,
really? And is it this a matter of national importance? I don't understand the prioritization right here.
Why is it an issue?
It would be big because he's a it's of his prominence, but then at the same time, why?
Well, the debt is equally prominent.
Well, of course, it's not chicken.
It's
the money. It's the money that we're looking at. Follow the money as it is.
933 million.
There must be some sound logic because these headlines aren't the work. It isn't the work of one person.
Of course, yeah.
There's
a team behind this.
And there must be a reason why they decided to. But
I would have loved to be a fly on the wall.
I agree with you
meeting.
that what they are pandering to is the insatiable appetite that we seem to have for the sensational, and sometimes the irrelevant. But yes, but sometimes, because as you say correctly, we have bigger problems we're dealing with in the country, and there are things that are important. Yes, but this should have appeared in the Nairobian.
Airing somebody else's, dirty linen in public.
Nairobian tend to focus on such personal matters. But I'm sure they understand why they decided.
They were told Tuju's plan was to use the money to build a 30-room palatial home that he would then sell to retirees. I mean, this could happen to anyone.
It could happen to anyone.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like we said, he's not the first, and I don't think he will be the last.
Right.
Either.
Because
All
after
right.
you read the story, you then, and so what?
Yeah. Then. Okay.
Okay.
It continues.
So, yeah. There's more, though, in the other papers and in the Standard.
Yeah. On the front page of the Daily Nation, Ruto allies magic bullet against Raila. Force Uhuru's hand is what he's trying to do, arguing that the ODM leader is a stranger in government. I mean, all right, can we get over this narrative already? Deputy President's men say that they will only present their views on BBI if the president attends the Nakuru rally. Right, so if he doesn't come, they're not presenting their views, which is okay. Let's get this train moving, or keep it moving in this case. Where are we going with this thing?
Absolutely.
You're demanding he attend. If he doesn't attend, you won't attend. What is that? Are you
Yeah.
baiting the man? Is this some kind of, carrot that you're hoping that he's going to bite? It's clear. If he doesn't come, then
Yeah.
Please
you carry on
remember,
with your business.
Not only that, these are astute politicians who know how to draw attention to themselves, and they're using clearly any means possible. You actually dare give the president an ultimatum.
Ultimatum. If you don't come,
And-
therefore we will not do.
And it makes sense.
As we say in Nigeria, continue carrying your shoulder up. That's your problem.
Remember when we had the elections in Kibra, the by-elections?
Right.
We had similar talk, okay? But then there was this debate of when the Jubilee candidate went to State House. Was that a photo op?
Or
Was
just
it,
Probably.
well, yes, was it an indication that the president supported the candidature?
It was for optics to show.
And-
of course,
and
one of the
that
narratives
debate
was that
went on
it was
and-
for optics
Yeah.
to show that he actually
Did it
support.
really matter?
No. In 3 minutes, we had forgotten about it. So whether
Precisely.
he supported or not,
You know the Nakuru rally will come and go.
this is what I'm saying.
But the real issue here is that, remember, there was a lot of hoo-ha and there was a lot of talk about even more hoo-ha regarding Eldoret.
Yeah.
So if you have a Nakuru rally and you skip the Eldoret one,
But in this case, it's been cancelled. The Eldoret rally has been cancelled because there are fears,
yes,
unfounded or not,
You know,
that
this-
there would be violence
you
because
can
it is the
cancel
deputies.
it and maybe have it later.
Yeah.
If you skip it altogether,
That's
then
another message on its
it's
own.
another message because it means Nakuru is in the Rift Valley. So a rally will have been held. Remember
In
they're
the Rift
holding-
Valley, yes.
they have. One was held in Kisii, done. That particular part of the world. Another one was held in Kakamega,
Kakamega,
done.
finish.
Then another one was held, was it?
Narok,
Yeah.
Done.
Mombasa,
Done.
Garissa,
Garissa.
done. Rift Valley is left, and then Nairobi.
Was it Kitui or was it Machakos?
Meru, and then there was Kitui.
Kitui,
Yes.
done.
Meru,
Yes.
done.
They didn't have one in Kitui and then have one in
In
Makueni.
Machakos.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Done. So if you have it in Nakuru, done.
Bavwane.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
This is
but
all
then-
underpinned, though, by the argument that the ODM leader is a stranger in government. This seems to be a
Stranger
narrative that
in
they want to
government.
continue to peddle as we go along. It's
These
conditioning.
these
At this point, it's
narratives,
conditioning, if
it
you ask
is.
me.
But these narratives have a nasty tendency of turning back on you.
Mm.
Because if you are talking about being a stranger to government, you really have to explain what it is you mean.
You also have to then define which government we're talking about here.
You know, political analyst Javas Bigambo has put it quite well. I would love that this wouldn't be the scenario, but he says either way, the ground is already slippery with swords already drawn. Every statement from the opposing sides is an invitation to a duel. So I'm looking at it as there's the BBI. And I like to keep referring to that particular document and what it was meant for. It was meant to go against this type of politics and, back and forth and trying to figure out who's the kingpin and what does so-and-so's attendance mean. Because ideally, it would mean that people are gathering to give their views. But then these views are now being leveraged against certain political, leaders, which is not right. I mean, we are going against... It's counterintuitive for you to be giving ultimatum based on something, on something that is supposed to be bringing us together, helping us move forward, and particularly away from this type of politics.
You're being logical about it, aren't
Yes,
you?
yeah.
No, you shouldn't be logical. And
When it
if you
comes
must
to
be logical,
politics.
apply political logic. Remember, if you have a rally in Eldoret,
Yeah.
it actually bestows a certain narrative on that particular rally.
Okay.
Remember, I'm calling it a rally, okay? If you have it in Nakuru, it's a totally different narrative. Why was the BBI not held in Kisumu or Migori? Why Kisii?
People would have been up in arms now
Yeah.
and said that you've
Precisely.
taken it to the
To the-
hometown
yes.
of
And so,
Yes,
and
yes.
therefore,
stranger in
has
government.
Yeah.
Yes. You make a political move. This is a political process.
Yes.
And the noises we're hearing are political. And they must be judged and seen in that light.
Political view.
Political noises being leveled at a political situation. That's what you must not lose sight of.
Okay.
So this is relevance seeking.
This is relevance seeking.
Yes.
We look at this in more detail in the next hour in terms of whether Uhuru, as president, needs to attend these rallies, looking at the fact that the BBI is his baby, that this was the product of the marriage that was the handshake. But looking at other stories for now that are making headlines, coronavirus, of course, still on. We have more deaths coming out of the United States. Italy then now having asked children not to go to school. They've shut down that as well. The World Health Organization has warned of protective gear shortage as the coronavirus cases rise worldwide. And medics now, interestingly enough, CT, medics are anxious over possible virus outbreak.
Right.
And they're now saying the country could run into a crisis if the coronavirus strikes, since a large number of health workers have not been trained on the illness. And we heard yesterday that they had been trained. So what are we talking about?
Yeah, and as this happens and as it continues to make the news, I'd like to call our attention to also the opportunity, which is the fertile ground that there is right now for fake news. Because yesterday someone was really concerned, asking me that about the 70 cases of coronavirus that have been proved to be happening in the country, and I kept telling them, please, there's nothing happening in Kenya. But they were convinced that the Kenya-Tanzania border has been shut down, and also that there's over 60 cases of people infected with the coronavirus. And you see, this is just the typical scenario where we would find such kinds of narrative coming up and taking root. So we need to be careful, actually, with the information that's coming out and that we are consuming, because it could lead to a panic.
Well, if you're talking of panic, if you look at page 12
Yeah.
of the Standard, villagers flee as gods of the lake cross boundaries.
Which gods are these ones?
Well, Lake Victoria is not only swelling up, as I say, the lake has entered people's houses. But
It's not funny, but it's the way you're saying.
Yeah, you put it.
Okay.
well, it has, hasn't it?
Okay.
5 years ago, North Carolina State University Department of Marine Earth and Atmosphere made a prediction 5 years ago. It largely went ignored. The Standard, of course, carried the newspaper in an article, the issue in an article. But what they were saying is that every so often, what happens is that the lake swells.
Yeah.
This is despite the fact that clear skies, everything, but they
It
swell.
swell.
And you need to understand, it's 10 meters per day.
Oh,
Yes, so yes,
that is alarming.
That's a lot of
If you wanna
water.
panic
that's a lot
about
of water.
something.
So if you had put up this house next to the sea, you soon find that the sea is next to you.
Or that you will be living under the sea.
Yeah.
Yes, with the sea.
You're a resident
Take a
of
look at the
sea.
pictures on page 12 and you'll see for yourself what city is talking about. It's pretty panic worthy.
It is. If you come from that part of the country where you are next to the lake, this isn't something that you would consider strange.
Strange.
Yeah.
It's
No.
normal.
No. Again, this is not flooding.
This
With
is the
lots of
swelling
rain.
of the lake.
Swelling.
Yes, exactly. You see,
Yeah.
most people assume that when it rains around the lake, that the water. No. Remember the rivers that
Like a
feed,
river, yeah.
feed
Feed
into
into the lake.
So you need to look for rain in where these
Where it's
rivers
coming
originate.
up from.
Yes, if there's
Uphill,
lots of rain there,
yeah.
then
This is what
the
is
lake-
going to happen.
Exactly.
All right, going to take a break and look at traffic situation. We'll be back in a bit as we continue looking at what is making news in Kenya and around the world. All right, Thursday morning. It is Thursday, isn't it? Right. Traffic is building up on Wayaki Way already towards town. The 87, however, is open, moving slowly towards the city centre. And Mombasa Road giving us what we normally have. The showers that are still occurring within the city means that people are going to be moving a lot slower today. After the bumps at the highway at the survey, it's clear on Thika Road all the way to the Pangani Tunnel. And that was about 15 minutes ago. We'll see how that changes in a bit. Mombasa Road, like we said, very slow because of the showers. People are moving even slower, getting to the city, rather to the Nyayo Stadium roundabout, and then onto Uhuru Highway is okay, moving very slowly, but it is moving. Taking a look around industrial area with very slow movement this morning, and then getting onto Jogo Road. It'll take you a while to get into the city centre, but around the city stadium roundabout, it is not so bad. Kamiti Road to Garden City looking very good, no traffic. Kiambu Road will probably get us into 6 lanes in a very short while, but for now it's not so bad. The roads tend to be slippery because it's raining, so we're asking everybody to be very, very careful as you plow your route this morning. Spice FM KE, tell us what you see. The southern and eastern bypasses are open, folks, so those can be used. Give us a call on 0719 012 600 and let's keep people moving this Thursday morning.
Broadcasting worldwide, Spice FM.
You're tuned into the biggest.
Spice up your life.
That's John.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings
Right,
done
you're
right.
tuned into the
94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Situation Room. We are broadcasting live on KTN's Morning Express. My name is Trix Ingado. I am joining the folks on Spice FM, Siti Muga and Ndu Oko. Today we're taking a look at what's making headlines. Very intriguing stories today. And one that has been trending for the past, I think since last week, is the shortage of blood in the country. We are told that on page 12 that expectant mothers stare at a crisis in life and death blood shortage mess, and this is something that we have all been worried about because the funding for this was cut short a few years ago. We're given time to sort ourselves up. Clearly, we are not ready to handle the need for blood in the country.
The folks from the Kenya National Blood Transfusion... too many consonants in
Start
that.
again.
Blood
The
Transfusion
Say it slowly,
Service.
yes.
Kenya National Blood Transfusion Service.
Thank
We'll be
you.
in the studio tomorrow and maybe be able to answer some of these questions.
shed
But the
some
questions
light.
are rife. I mean, here again, blood crisis hampers safe motherhood.
Right.
And this is in The Nation. And then going further on to page 12, talking about the fact that we're going to see quite a problem.
Yeah.
Expectant mothers stare at crisis in life and death blood shortage mess.
Yeah.
Expectant mothers who in a lot of cases need an ample supply
Yeah.
and in sometimes need
Handy because it could happen
it
quite
could happen
suddenly.
at any time.
Yeah.
It's not happening.
It's interesting that they've pointed out that this would be the most vulnerable of the group, but you have to remember that we're talking about accident victims as well. We're talking about radiotherapy patients, mothers and
Cancer
children,
patients.
cancer patients, people living with sickle cell anemia actually need a number of pints of blood every year just to survive, just to avoid crisis and things like that. So it is quite a big problem, and sometimes it's not a question of how generous we are as a public in donating blood. It's a question of whether they are prepared to actually keep it well. Do they have the reagents, the right packaging, and the facilities to to keep it fresh? Is that the word I'm looking for?
Viable?
Viable, yes.
Many questions up to be asked. Demands are being made. The sentiment is that, or the expression has been made, that the health ministry slept on the job. The Ministry of Health does not seem to have made any efforts to address the urgent situation, namely that the entire country only has 7,500 units of blood against the 164,000 that they require yearly. The cost to transfusion services includes collection of blood, which requires storage in sterile bags, testing and screening, as well as delivery. By supporting Kenya, PEPFAR, the cornerstone of the U.S. Global Health Assistance, wanted to ensure quality assurance in HIV programs. KNBTS records show that these services were once done at hospitals, but it was cumbersome to ensure the transfused blood was clean, that is free of infection. So, I mean, that should scare you off. Should knock your socks off with a bit of fear, realizing that even some of the blood then available is not infection-free. From 2004 to date, PEPFAR has disbursed 7.3 billion shillings, which catered for 100% of the services from a centralized point: buildings, vehicles, staff salaries, blood collection and screening for HIV, syphilis and hepatitis C, information systems and policy guidelines. So they funded this thing 100%. And look, they gave ample warning, and they said we are pulling out. They didn't just stop. They said we're pulling out over time. They didn't even remove it at once. They started reducing the amounts that they were giving, and they said, folks, you need to be ready to be able to do this on your own.
Kindly. Clearly we did not get that memo. And I understand there was even a plan. It's back to our usual sentiment of there being poor implementation strategies.
Like we said, KNBTS will be with us tomorrow to answer some of these questions, because it's necessary that we have a clear picture of what the situation is, and going forward, what are we really going to do.
Now, would you there's another story on page 3 that has me smiling, because I find it a little humorous. Now, a retiree's rare generosity to pregnant women has been halted. We are told a man has been dishing out money randomly, making his children concerned that he might deplete his savings. The court agreed that his children and put a plug on his philanthropy. So the High Court has barred the 61-year-old from accessing his bank account after his children complained that he would deplete his pension. He was gifting pregnant women 2,000 each. My question would be, isn't it his right to do whatever he wants
to do with his own money? His children are afraid that if he's ever going to, knock on heaven
project.
If he's going to knock on heaven's door and there's nothing left for them, of course they're worried.
You need to be aware that I am 61 years old.
Oh, okay.
And I'm not knocking at death's door.
Why are you making this?
I'm being sensitive.
Oh, okay.
No, by the time he's...
Half an hour ago, you were blushing. Now you're being sensitive. City, what's going on?
It's the weather.
Blame it on the rain.
Yeah.
Climate change.
But I think what she meant was that by the time he is knocking on heaven's door, he will have finished his money if he keeps at it with the 2,000.
There's a little detail here of responsibility. And children also have rights. If you talk of his rights,
so
he
has
money. Them. Yes.
Oh, come on.
If they're still dependents, they do. That's why there's that term dependence. If they're adults, that's a totally different matter altogether. But if they are at an age where it is required or mandated that the parent looks after them, then they do have a say on what you have.
But they were in court, right?
Yes,
and so according to the laws of Kenya, a minor will not give testimony unless in special circumstances. So they were all four children were in court.
Were they all adults?
Yeah.
But we're saying that they were not under 18.
We are assuming that because they're the ones
not under 18.
They weren't represented.
They were the ones.
But are you saying that if you are under 18, you're not even allowed to be in court?
Or you can be in court, but according to this report, the four siblings told the court that their father needed care.
The 36-year-old son.
Voila.
And rare. It is rare, if not impossible, to find a selfless stranger dishing out gifts, leave alone money. So he says the JKK, that's a fake name they're using. His case is special. His son told the court that he was too generous, that he splashed his pension on strangers, risking emptying his account as soon as his good deeds, or if his good deeds are not tamed. So he said, and however, he said that he's not just gifting everyone, he's specifically gifting pregnant women, and he finds this quite troubling.
You like that, City?
I find this very interesting. But then they took issue with it and the court agreed. I would have wondered
what
if
exactly
he was...
the court agree with?
With the son's sentiment.
He should not be spending his money anyhow.
Spending this money.
You know, if I don't have this stated what the case actually was, because this is what is being reported. If they reported that this was somebody who was actually even endangering his own life or stripping himself of a likely livelihood or putting himself in a position where he himself may be in want and or probably just leading himself to destitution. I don't know what the case was.
But
In this case, they've actually stopped him from accessing his account.
Yeah.
Stop,
Actually,
don't even touch the money.
That's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
One would need to know what the case was, because for you to be able to do that and for the judge to agree with you, it must have been a compelling case.
Yeah, because anyway, the judge heard that the situation had deteriorated such that JKK, a man born in Kenyaga, needed care and someone to manage his account.
See?
So I would question
Now,
if he's
his mental
well.
capacities.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, because if you aren't pregnant, I'm told you're given 1,000 shillings only.
Or some kind of fetish there with pregnant women.
Because they know him better, I think they would be able to judge whether this is just philanthropy or whether there's a bit of a twist to it. So hopefully, if he's not well, he will get well soon. But I thought this was an interesting story to highlight. It's on page 3 of the Standard if you want to take a look at it and see for yourself what JKK, as he's being called, was up to. Yeah.
Today's pullouts is the home and away in the Standard, looking at real estate. Today's magazine looking at real estate in the country and some worrying trends that we see. Auctioneers stuck with homes nobody can buy. And in this case, where people are now not able to sell, or rather not able to pay their loans that they may have taken for mortgages and such. Unfortunately, the situation that we see is getting a little bit more dire. And they're stuck with stock worth billions that they cannot sell. And just looking at some of those numbers, 146.1 million, 9 residential hotel apartments in Mombasa, 500 million, Upper Hill Hotel, 9-story commercial property worth 285 million in Nakuru, 3-bedroom villa in the Grapefruit Valley Lodge, 50 million, penthouse in Kileleshwa, 50 million, 104.5 million shillings serviced apartments in Parklands. So this is interesting because it has taken a snapshot around the country. It's not just in Nairobi where this problem is. It's a countrywide problem where even the one that you can imagine, you sell off a piece of property that somebody has not been able to pay for with the hopes that somebody's going to pick it up really quickly. But even the pickup is not happening. People either are not interested, but the more likely scenario is that people don't have the money.
And the institutions that are behind this
People don't have the money they're asking for.
And
the report is that only 1 in 10 such properties get taken up. Now, the question that I would ask is, you see, when you have a situation such as this one, when it is clear that things aren't what you call normal, it isn't business as usual.
As usual,
yes.
Should you then not find solutions which are also not usual?
Exactly.
Yes.
Because if they're taking this property from the people who haven't been able to sell them off,
What makes you think somebody else is
going
going
to buy it?
Yes.
Because maybe they were assuming these are just not diligent business people, but clearly there seems to be a bigger problem than them just not being able to
If
pay
you
up.
look at the rate of defaults, if you talk to anyone in the banking sector, it is profound. And if you look at the history of many of these people, there are people who in the past have borrowed money and have paid.
Yes. So, but the fact that they got those loans
Means that they had proved that they could
at some
pay.
point they could.
Yeah.
Or yes, now, take 2 examples. Last year, the national government issued instructions to county governments that they were being given money. One, they were halting all development projects. They were being given money to offset pending debts. Now, imagine if you work for the county or even the national government, because the national government also owes its vendors money, and you haven't been paid for a year. Then extend your horizons and think about 4 years.
Yeah.
If it was a bank loan, how much interest do you think will have been heaped on that loan? And by that, yes.
And how far to the bare bone do you think they would have stripped you to get their
Yes.
money back?
And by the way, the interest doesn't stop just because you can't pay.
No.
Keeps going.
It continues compounding.
Yes, exactly. Now, so this is a situation that is facing many, many business people.
Yeah.
People have gone under. Some have died. Yes, I am saying that, yes, we have a situation that a false boom, so to speak, in the property market. That particular bubble has burst.
The bubble has burst. So there was a bubble at this point. It has burst. We'll be looking at that also in the next hour and talking about really what is going on with properties in this country. What are people able to afford or not? This is Kenya's biggest conversation. You're in the Situation Room this morning as we look at issues that are happening in our world. We'll be back in a minute, take a short break, and we come back and we continue with this.
Chilled Spice. Welcome to Spice FM, the best exclusive radio station bringing you the best mix of the best music ever. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
Room on Spice FM. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. Wherever you're tuned in to, broadcasting live in Nairobi on 94.4, Mombasa on 87.9, Nakuru on 96.0, Eldoret 96.7, Nyeri on 90.9, Kisumu on 102.5, and Malindi on 97.7. It's a joint collaboration this morning with KTN Morning Express, and the lovely Trix Ngado is here with us as we look through what's going on. I'm Ndioko in the studio with City Muga, and we continue looking at what's going on in the country. City, what else do you see?
What else do I see? Well, what I see is this. Our papers seem to always get the priorities a little mixed up in terms of what is important and what they think may actually sell the paper. If you look at the headline on the Standard, why, I mentioned in passing, why Raila brought back ODM rebels from the fold.
Yeah.
You know, the story isn't new with political parties. It's being presented as though it's this new thing. It isn't new. No. Just the law prohibited people from jumping from one party to the other around the electioneering time.
Yeah.
But people moving from party to party, not new. And the reasons being given, if you read the story and the headlines, you'll find there's a little disconnect. This has happened all the time. People have left the party. I'll give you two examples. In the 2013 elections, I know there's one particular governor in what we call the former Nyanza area who actually vied on what we call a PDP party.
Yeah.
Got elected. The MP from my constituency also stood on a PDP party. Got elected. 2017 elections, they were back in ODM. It's normal. It's not even something unusual. Somebody may lose at the party primaries, as we call them, or the elections, and they feel, no, I feel I'm a little popular. We had cases of even MCAs. I'm giving these two examples because it is assumed that these are things that are happening now, and it's being presented as though it's happening now. It happened from time immemorial.
It's always happened in this way.
Yes, it has. Yes, it has. How many photo ops do you see of parties welcoming new members? Being given a T-shirt,
and
being
they
given
were
a
in
hat.
other parties prior to that,
Yes.
and would have sworn along those party lines previously.
Or they swore.
Right.
And some left these parties, they forsook the parties and spoke ill of those parties, and then did a complete turnaround
Even
and
spoke
came
ill
back.
of the party leaders
Yes.
and talked about how
Seriously.
terrible they were in
Yes.
terms of moving the
But in
country
coming
forward.
back, they spoke about just how misguided they had been. And now that they had seen the light,
Yeah.
here they were.
I think while this might not have been a new thing, or is not a new thing, I think we need, as we approach such stories as the press, to think larger and find different angles that make it new, even if it's not a new story. So perhaps educating the public on the rules and what would inform political party decisions and why these people would strategize in this particular ways rather than just pointing it out as if it was some new phenomenon that's happening.
Well, there's also the interesting thing. The new LSK president,
Avi?
yes, reveals a 100-day plan and wants 41 judges sworn in.
I have a question before you even get onto the story. Why is it always 100 days?
Yeah.
Everybody who
Donald Trump.
100
Uhuru
days.
Kenyatta.
100 days.
Sonko.
100 days. Buhari. 100 days. What is it with this 100
It has a
days?
nice
Is it
ring
after
to it.
it sounds nice, right? In 100 days
Even
I would
Moi
have done.
Kibaki, I think, had 100 days.
Yeah,
He did.
you never really say 3 months and 10 days. 100 days, and it's that time with which are we then saying
half a
within
year.
100? Right?
Yeah.
Are we then saying within 100 days? Had you not done this, then you would not have
You know, the-
succeeded.
Succeeded. Because
moment-
they shoot themselves in the foot, I think.
I think so.
They
You know,
do
the
that.
word 100 is associated with many things in our minds. It's a century, if I'm not wrong.
It is. Yes.
That's one. There's 100 shillings.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, and if one gets to 100 years of age, they have really tried. It is a captive number. So when you mention it vis-a-vis a political setup, you mention it vis-a-vis an administrative issue like this one, it sounds like you've taken a definitive step in ensuring a certain problem is solved.
Right.
But-
And if you get 100%, you're perfect, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's the perfect score. 10 out of 10,
Yeah.
100 out of 100. It's never 200.
No.
It's all.
100.
Ask the question, why are exams not out of 200? Why is it 100? So 100 is a word that we associate with everyday life. But it also shows that he is a man of action, and he's determined, and he's
Here's a plan.
hit the ground running. And
It's
there's
not a long
plan.
time, oh.
Yeah. It's not.
Then you pause and ask, this issue of having judges sworn in, who has the last word?
Yeah, you can say all you want to say until you're blue in the face.
It's not up to you.
But if the executive and the
is-
judiciary is not in tandem with this 100-day plan of yours, my friend.
Yesterday
Unfortunately.
we had an issue of
41.
the small matter of the audited,
Yeah.
the
Sorry,
audited,
City.
yes.
But Trix whispered, 41. Yeah, he actually
what the
plans
hell?
to hire
41
judges
And you
in
do
these 100
understand
days.
what's happening with the judiciary lately, right? How is he going to overcome all those difficulties and the lack of goodwill that the judiciary is facing? At the same time, I feel like he's just riding on the wave of support based on his, being voted in.
No, but he's right to do so.
But then, is it realistic?
Or
It
is he
doesn't
sending
have
out
to
a
be.
message?
Yeah.
Not necessarily that he
Yeah.
wants
It
to
doesn't
hire
have to
these
be that.
41,
Just
but he's sending out a
carrying it
message
on as
of
far
the
as
necessity
when
of the
the
same.
Jubilee government told Kenyans that one of the things they were going to do for schools is provide all school children laptops.
I now realize that this thing that I've just said, it wasn't necessarily that they were going to provide them, but they saw the need for technology to be the cornerstone of education in this country.
Yes.
And that was how they were passing the message.
Yeah.
What-
In
And they
this
were the
case,
digital guys.
Harvey also understands that we need more to sort out this problem
it's
of
political
capacity.
messaging.
Exactly.
And you, as a reader and as a journalist, we need to understand
Right.
when politicians are just making political utterances and when they mean what they
They
are
say.
saying. A lot of the times it's just political utterances to achieve a certain goal. And the goal is I need to appear like a man of action, a man who has plans.
Knows what
and
he's talking
yes,
about.
and so I'm giving myself time and it's in 100 days.
So this article should be a sort of big question as to whether this plan could actually work, and should interrogate this plan rather than just place it there.
He's
as if
promoting himself
Yeah.
by
Yes, he is.
claiming that he has an agenda, and this is not the only one.
Yeah, but then we are buying it instead
Yes,
of
he has other
interrogating.
things he has said he has
Yeah.
in a pipeline that he wants to do. So people who elected him and people in the LSK can now look forward. This is not a bad strategy.
Politically.
No,
speaking,
it's not. Because if you say and state out in the open the things you plan to do, you're essentially saying, judge me by this.
Yes, but then as a journalist, you should be aware that this is a strategy, and you should be aware of the other times where it has failed or it has just been said for the sake of being saying. And therefore, when angling a story, you need to approach it in a different way so that you're not literally just dishing the same thing to your audience.
Yes, but this was part of an interview. Now, in an interview, you will ask questions and the person will
He'll
respond.
answer, and
Yes.
this is one thing.
Yes. But again, Trix, you're right. Even if it's an interview, it should be analyzed further and say, okay, look,
What does this actually mean?
we've had other people in your position, making not similar utterances, but
The same.
promises, yes. And we've seen the outcome of some of those things.
And the insiders in this who know whether this is realistic or not. So I would also love to hear another voice that comes in and said, wait a minute, hold on. This is why this has not been done by predecessors. So the fact that this guy is promising this, or just doing,
He's gone into details, by
Yeah.
the way, because he hopes to meet the AG. He also hopes to meet the Chief Justice and also hopes to meet the President to give advice on possible solutions to this.
Okay.
You imagine that these three people don't know what the problem is.
That's it.
Quite aware of what the problem is.
They know exactly, but as president of the LSK, that position actually gives him a certain capacity and power.
Speaking of problems, I have an 800 billion shilling problem.
Where?
800 billion.
Yes, only. The US says that an amnesty offered by Kenya in 2018 facilitated the laundering of more than 800 billion shillings because the taxman did not have a policy to monitor the inflows. In 2016, Treasury Cabinet Secretary Henry Rotich offered an amnesty designed to facilitate tax payments. It enabled Kenyans to repatriate money from offshore accounts without revealing the source. According to the International Narcotics Control Strategy Money Laundering Report released by the U.S. Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs, how's that for a mouthful? Yesterday, the Kenya Revenue Authority failed to adopt a policy to confirm if the money was actually returned. KRA has been unable to trace approximately $7.9 billion or to confirm that the registered funds were not transferred out of Kenya again, raising concerns the amnesty facilitated laundering of illicit cash. Mr. Rotich has since been dropped from the cabinet. Did you know this?
The amounts that they're mentioning may actually fall short.
Could be
No,
less,
the
could be
actual
more.
amount.
It
No,
could be
not
more.
could be. More. Remember,
yes.
if you're talking about money, it isn't money that we've been reading about last year and this year.
No.
It begins from the saga of Kenya Power. It begins from the saga of Goldenberg. It begins from the saga of Anglo Leasing. All these things, a lot of these monies were sent out of the country. But the figures also are not just the few billions. This one I'm going to say the few billions they're talking about. It's likely to be in the trillions that have found their way back into the country.
Into the country.
Yes.
We had the EACC head here and talking about cash flows that sometimes they're even unable to trace. It has left Kenya, it's gone to Milan, it's in Rome, and then it is in Mauritius, and then it's in India, before then it finds its way back into the country. By the time you do this entire trace, actually figuring out where it went, it could be quite a walk in the
By the
park.
way, it is
Absolutely.
please remember that it is a business. There are people whose job it is
To move money.
to make
To
money
move
anonymous.
money.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, to make it
Yeah.
disappear.
It's what they do.
Offshore
Yeah.
accounts and whatnot. And obviously, there are people who actively seek for loopholes such as this
You know,
to take
it's
advantage
very
of it.
rich of
Yeah.
the Americans to go about this business. There's a place called Delaware.
They're the masters of
in
this
the
game,
US,
no?
where you can walk in and register a company almost immediately. It's almost instantaneous. All right? So the issue of applying some of these rules, the US themselves don't quite apply these rules to their citizens.
Yeah.
Of course not.
They themselves, within their shores and outside, just immediately outside the borders, they also have facilities that offer these offshore banking. And it is with the knowledge of the US. By the way, it's a profitable business.
It is.
For the longest time, countries like Austria, countries like Switzerland were known to actually be havens for keeping money. Their laws permitted it.
Yeah.
They're not breaking anyone's law. Switzerland was neutral. So if
If
you
you're
had
interested,
yes,
yeah.
it's a nice place to keep your money because it's neutral, you know. And their laws would not permit that money to be repatriated. With time, these changes have been made. But this is a practice that takes place all over the world.
Right.
This is a case where the US is talking with a forked tongue.
In this case, and if we have the opportunity to shine the light somewhere else, why not use it?
Yes.
This is Kenya's biggest conversation. We've been looking at what's been going on in the papers. We're going to go in depth into some issues in a bit. We'll take a look at what's happening on the roads and see where you should or should not go in a short while. Keep it here. We'll go into the hour and we'll talk about really what is happening with the BBI, and on the other hand, what is happening with real estate in the country and how you can be protected, or in this case, make sure that you remain afloat. Kenya's biggest conversation. This is the Situation Room. Keep it here.
Spice up your life. Spice FM. Nakuru.
Still showers in many parts of the city, so the roads are a lot slower this morning because of the fact that they're still very wet. Thika Road as normal all the way from Roy Sambu going towards the city centre, moving very, very slowly. The rain is pouring down there as well. Kangemi to ABC moving slowly. Bumper to bumper is what we see. Outer Ring Road, there is a problem on the way to Donholm. Very slow this morning. Coming off of Jogo Road and then into the city centre, moving but very slowly as well. I think those are the adjectives we're going to use today, folks. Very slowly. Ngong Road from the Prestige all the way to town. It's moving slowly but smoothly as we see it now. Ngong Road, a lorry has hit another car, so we have an accident there further down the road as you get to the City Mortuary roundabout. And Mombasa Road, we see it's the same thing as normal. Bagavi Way is an option for you to get into the city. We'll take a look at Langata Road in a bit and see how that may have changed. But around Bomas, we still have a bottleneck as it takes us then towards the city. Traffic everywhere. You're going to get stuck today. If you have already left, it's a good thing. If you have not, you might want to wait it out a little bit. Any other incidents or accidents, we'll let you know. Let us know what you see. Spice FM KE is how you can reach us on Twitter. Give us a call if you need to. We want to be moving. Let us know.
This is the Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latin, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is the Situation Room. The only way to start your day.
Kenya's biggest conversation. The live stream's up. spicefm.co.ke, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. We're in the studio this morning with Trix Ngado from the Morning Express on KTN News. Myself, Ndoko, and CT Muga. Now, we're taking a knife into some of the issues that we see, and we're going to start off with the BBI right now and look at the glaring absence of President Uhuru Kenyatta at some of these rallies, and looking at the point that, there's not been one rally where he's been present, and now we hear that there have been demands coming out from the deputy president that, look, you must be here, come in here and stamp your authority in terms of what is going on, and let it be that you lend credence to the process and the entire initiative, because without that, it kind of waters down everything else. We have somebody who is peddling the narrative, who is not in government, as it were, and we can't have him be the one leading the pack. It has to be you as the president, so come in. Does it bear any kind of significance that over the last 8 or so rallies, President Uhuru Kenyatta has not been there? He has been pushing the BBI agenda in what other forums that he has been present in. But now we see this call, and it has been very clear from the deputy president that we need him to be there. If he's not, then we also will not. We again will not make our our stance clear or known as per what we feel should be done. But then it comes about that we have to ask the question, then really does it matter whether he's there or not? Number one, will this train not keep moving?
Right.
It's already left the station. Is it going to stop because of these recent sentiments that we have seen? The deputy president's men, of course, those the ones who have been normally speaking, are the ones who are saying that they will only present their views on BBI if President Kenyatta attends the Nakuru rally. So if he does not attend the rally, they will not tell us what their plan is for the country. And I am saying at this point, it really doesn't matter. This thing is moving. Whether you want to look for some kind of political expediency or alignment and say that you will not present your views, it doesn't matter. The initiative is moving. The train has left the station. The wheels of the bus keep going. So with this or without it, it really doesn't matter. So I see this being somebody shouting because somebody took their toy in the playground. Come on.
Actually, they may very well know that the president plans to come to Nakuru, and because the president plans, it isn't in the public domain.
Oh, so they're just playing to
jump the gun and make it appear.
So then, what
as
would
if
happen?
you
Come
put pressure
Saturday,
for him to
come
attend.
Saturday,
Oh,
you'll
come
see.
on.
We told you.
Yeah.
We
Had
knew.
he
Had he
not,
not come,
eh.
we would not have told you what it is that we wanted
This
to
is
say.
ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
No, it is. Remember,
It's politics.
thank you. You really must judge political utterances from a political perspective. And politics, much as we think we live with it on a daily basis, it's actually a life on a totally different planetary system. And if you don't understand its nuances and you don't understand the rules by which it functions, you can actually miss it completely. Remember, every country in the world has traditions by which they actually conduct their affairs.
Right.
Okay? I'll give you an example, for instance. The Greek electoral system, which is proportional representation, they have a system where the party that has the most votes in the election gets to actually form a government. But they do something more. They add you 50 more seats. And the reason why they add you 50 more seats is so that you can't be shaken. You don't have this problem of having to maneuver and look for other partners. So the system gives you 50
And you can
more
actually
seats.
focus on.
Yes. Now, if you look at the UK, it is required, well, usually it is hoped that these prime ministers move into a place called 10th Downing Street. And usually they will move in with their wives. Now, Boris Johnson is the first prime minister in history who will be moving to 10th Downing Street without his wife.
Where is his wife?
Well, second one, of course, because they've been separated for a while, but he'll be moving in with his 18-month girlfriend. So these are oddities.
Oh, sorry.
Pause.
Hold.
No. The girlfriend is not 18 years old.
No, it's
The relationship is
It's
18 months
The way you
old.
said
Yeah, I
it.
know.
Yes, of course.
What's happening?
Now, it's an oddity, but you must understand we are discussing an oddity in Kenyan politics. And the pronouncements are, in some ways, fairly unique to Kenyans. Think, whenever a Kenyan politician says, we are talking about development, so-and-so is hindering development, what do they actually mean? It is said in a public
So-and-so.
arena to assume that that the moving forward of the nation is at stake. But is it really usually? Resoundingly, no.
No.
This person is getting in my way,
Yeah.
but I can't go around telling people it's getting in my
So
way.
development.
So I
is
will
not
make it seem as if he's getting in
public's
your way.
Yeah.
Because it's hindering development,
It
it
is
will come
you.
to
My
you.
development.
So if you allow this person, one, to continue speaking,
Yeah.
two, to get you into a position of leadership, essentially what they would be doing would be harming you as an
You.
individual. I have to
So
give it to
stop
these.
him.
Yeah, I have to give it to these guys at some point. They actually
Very
employ some
clever.
quite clever tactics to
Yes,
be able to
think
do this.
about it now. When have you seen the president at any of these BBI rallies?
He hasn't. Of
So
any
why
of
makes
should it
this
matter
special?
in
Thank
this
you.
one? Why is this particular one special? Right?
Yeah. And I'd love to point out that for those who keep saying that this is an outsider to government trying to influence, what would we have a BBI without that handshake that took place? So how can we even question the role of Raila Odinga, whether you support him or not in all this whole thing? Literally, the BBI came about following them coming together, deciding, well, let's put an end to a political adverse, what would I call it? Political. Let's stop being at political loggerheads. Do the handshake. Then let's come up with a document that will point the way forward. So how can you then question Raila Odinga's role in this whole thing? Honestly, that seems quite basic.
Well, I think it's clear they're not necessarily questioning his role, but what you do with the question is that
far-
you poke holes in the authenticity of the position by then asking the question. You say certain things that
As
then would be inflammatory. Look at the words that they use in this case. A stranger in government. Of course, what that does is that, you want to then, the
Reinforce
integrity
the
of his
narrative,
person, you want to reinforce what somebody's saying, that actually, who is this guy and what
To
authority
tell
does
us
he
and to
have
do
in
this,
this
yeah.
place?
Actually-
So they may actually believe that he's a superb politician and that he's doing a fantastic job, but because of the fact that they are aligning themselves in a particular position, what happens here is that they want to poke holes in his
Discredit
authenticity.
But
Yes.
Absolutely.
consider also, if you're a politician, you'll be very, very aware of the political landscape and the leanings of your people. Now, there are right now in Kenya, there are 3 individuals whose names make people's eyes sort of like go up.
Yes.
All right? Let's start it in order of the presidency. If you mention the president's name or you attach your name to the president, you attach yourself to that importance as well. If the statement was just made in general without reference to the president, nobody would
doesn't mean nobody would even bother
no one
listening
would
to
even talk about it. By the same token, if you make mention or reference to Raila Odinga in the same way, and now if you mention William Ruto, now the media has helped tremendously in pushing forward this agenda, where when the mention of any of these 3 individuals comes up, it certainly not just becomes newsworthy, but it's very newsworthy. It takes center stage. And this has played on for the longest time. Was it not earlier on this week when we were saying, look at these headlines? And the week before that we were saying again, look at
Look
these
at the
headlines.
headlines,
Come
yeah.
on, folks. Okay? The locust story has died completely.
It hasn't died, but in terms of reporting, it has
locusts
died.
themselves.
But it has died because
Yeah.
it's the media that carries out stories. So it
Yeah.
has died. The issue of the lake and the problems it's causing is on page 12. Okay?
Yeah.
If it wasn't for the special pullout on real estate, some of these things that we were
Wouldn't
talking
ever
about,
see the
you
light of
wouldn't
day.
Wouldn't
actually know.
know.
And yet, we are saying that there are very many Kenyans in this city. Let me even venture to say the bulk of the people who live in this city live in deplorable conditions.
Conditions.
Yes. So, these aren't highlighted. And this dictum that you must have a story that actually sells, well, that's one responsibility because it's a business, but it's a greater one. It's called the public good. Shouldn't people actually, honestly, genuinely know what is
What's
happening?
What is
on.
going on
Yes,
across sector?
outside politics.
Yes.
Exactly, outside politics.
Yeah.
Yes. And should not certain things then be given prominence so that the public can actually know and understand? Like now, you tell me, if you look at both the Nation and the Standard,
This morning.
tell me on which page you see the discussion on the coronavirus, except for the mention of the WHO Director General. Tell me where? With regards to Kenya,
Oh, well,
keep turning.
you keep going.
Yes,
Right.
you will keep going.
Yeah.
And yet, Italy has now shut down its schools. First European country to do so. Death in America has gone beyond 10. China has reported 35 deaths, 24 hours, in the last 24 hours. Other countries are following suit. Now, shouldn't you really be alarmed that this coronavirus that we speak of so carelessly is actually bringing the economy of this planet to its knees?
But what we're
course
being
it is,
alarmed by, unfortunately, what we're then being alarmed by is who said what about something that
Political
really
addresses.
doesn't matter,
Political addresses.
except
And who
for
is
how far
broke.
you want your information to go
That
and who is
the
broke,
importance of the Nakuru rally will end on Saturday.
and then it's done.
Done. It'll be. Are we talking about the Kitui rally? No.
No.
Are we talking about the?
Even the fantastic things that happened in Narok.
No.
No, not really talking about that anymore.
Yeah. We're over it now.
We're over it. We're going to take a look at what's going on with the weather. But before that, CT, today's proverb. That laugh, I love it.
Well, I have to laugh because I actually found this particular saying interesting. Use your tongue to count your teeth.
Every time he says it, I do it.
You tell us how many there are
Best of luck with that one.
when we unpack it.
What I found is easier is to count the teeth I don't have.
Didn't do the math.
That one is easier.
This is Kenya's biggest conversation. We'll take a look at the weather and we'll come back and continue with the conversation.
Spice FM, Nyeri. Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah.
You're listening to Spice FM. The weather with Spice FM.
Light showers through the city of Nairobi at 17 degrees. Going to continue through the day with highs of 26 and lows of 15. Mostly cloudy conditions in Nyeri today. Highs of 26 and lows of 14. The sun is out in Kisumu. Rain will follow later with highs of 29 and lows of 19. At 28 degrees in Malindi. Cloudy conditions through the day with highs of 32. In Nakuru, mostly cloudy. Highs of 27 and lows of 14. In Mombasa, 26 degrees, partly cloudy conditions, and rain will follow later with highs of 32 and lows of 26. In Eldoret at 14 degrees, highs of 24 and lows of 13. It's clear skies in Kampala this morning. Thunderstorms expected later with highs of 26 and lows of 21. Showers in Dar es Salaam right now at 24 degrees. Likely to continue through the day with highs of 31 and lows of 24. In Johannesburg, clear skies this morning, currently at 13 degrees. Clear skies later as well with highs of 26 and lows of 13. And finally, in Lagos, light showers this morning, probably going to end up in thunderstorms later with highs of 26 and lows of 20.
.9 Spice FM, Mombasa. Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
You are tuned in to Kenya's biggest conversation. This is the Situation Room, and I am Trix Ingado with Siti Muga and Ndu Oko. Today we are taking a look. We've already taken a look at the papers, reviewed what the press has prioritized, and we are now on the very important topic of the BBI and how the trends are in terms of the information flow and, of course, what the truth on the ground is. And later on, we'll be talking about real estate in the country.
So, I mean, looking at the importance or non-importance of President Uhuru Kenyatta at these rallies that have taken place over time, if anything, looking for a stamp of authority from the general populace that, yes, I am with this. But work has been going on in terms of what the message is that has been spread. However, also then coming from allies, and it's interesting that this comes from those allies to say that We need him here, basically to show that we are still together on this march and that we're still holding hands. The brotherhood still exists. I see that as the demand that's being made. Show us that you're with us, because if you don't, we're not going to lend our hand to this entire process. This could be the threat.
City, perhaps, please educate me. Why now and why Eldoret?
Or Nakuru.
Oh, Nakuru, yeah.
You know, remember these BBI rallies were supposed to be regional, meaning every part of the country needs to be represented. If the Garissa rally was supposed to represent the northern part of our country, the Meru meeting was supposed to represent the Mount Kenya region, and so forth. Now, the utterances around the BBI rallies, remember it was some people had been excluded. That's how it began.
Yes.
And then he changed and said, no, you have not been excluded. It is you has decided not to attend. Then there was a conversation, you attend, but only if you behave.
And we saw someone being
sit in that corner.
Disciplined, basically.
Yes. So it's like a certain discord that has existed within the Jubilee Party was now carried on to the BBI. And it makes great political sense, because the BBI has more coverage than anything else. So if you kick a fuss within the discussion of the BBI, you are likely to get more attention. You are more likely to get more mileage. So it makes perfect political sense to have your discussions and your disagreement about the BBI, and whether it's Eldoret, whether it's Nakuru, about the BBI. You bring in the president, you get even more attention. Do you really imagine, for instance, if the president had not been brought into this discussion, or his attendance or non-attendance?
Your relevance points would have docked quite a few.
Right.
Exactly.
Nobody ever says anything if they're not looking, especially the individuals that we see rallying around, the people that are called allies, or all the president's men, are never going to say anything unless it is going to have some kind of, forward trajectory for them.
It has to be for them.
It has to be for them. Yeah. Nobody's ever going to say this. We demand the president comes. As whom? Why?
Based on
what? So then it now gives you a flaw.
They know very well they can't demand.
They can't demand.
It's not that they don't know. They remember also, it emanates from a certain sense of power, but I call it a false sense
of power.
Yes, because you see, impunity brings with it that false sense of power, because you seem to have gotten away with a lot over a period of time. You assume, you don't realize it as a sell-by date. So you keep making utterances or doing things that you've done in the past, knowing that the past actually is precisely that, the past. The present may not necessarily look upon those activities kindly.
Right.
But it doesn't stop you from trying. One could even argue that you have a situation here where desperation is setting in. Someone is realizing that the clock is ticking.
And if I don't make a move now.
Yes, and you're not making a lot of movement. So what you do, the movement now is create a fuss.
Yeah. Seem like you're...
Because you tell me, what is the value addition in these utterances? Apart from focusing the attention on the utterer.
Or
the people the utterer represents. Remember, not very long ago, we had a situation where there was a complaint that if our leader, remember when the former President Moi passed away, did we not have some drama building around who was allowed where? And yet, one could see on TV, one could see all leaders who went to the residence in Nairobi, everyone was welcome.
Yeah.
We saw. This one, someone doesn't need to tell me. I needed to simply watch it. But yet, there was an issue.
Yeah.
It came up once and died. So you wonder, what on earth were these people talking about? Again, the individuals wanted to do something that would bring attention to them.
To themselves.
Yes. We already have a funeral. It's a big thing. But within that big thing called the funeral, you also want to stand out.
It's a platform, basically.
It is.
Yeah, but like we said, look, just imagine what is going to happen. Should President Uhuru show up in Nakuru on Saturday over the weekend, can you imagine what it's going to do for them in terms of political points that they made a demand? So it means that we are still running things as per, politics in this country. We've made a demand, and voila, the president shows up because he realizes the importance of him coming and hearing how important the message coming out of the Rift Valley is.
Yeah.
And we were the drivers of this particular conversation. So, hey, in terms of our potency as politicians, it is still very high up there. And if he doesn't come, then of course this would have probably no effect whatsoever.
I have read several articles before in these same papers that say that the president does call the shots and make certain decisions towards how these rallies play out.
The president is running the country. The president is running the country.
And obviously he has Somalia to worry about. And
development initiatives, other things that are happening in this country. You can imagine if we followed all of you to be traipsing about the country doing this kind of thing.
And these are
who is
rallies.
supposed to be doing the job? Who is supposed to be doing the development work in this country? Which is what he said a few months ago.
Right.
Wacha tufanye kazi. I am making sure that I am working on development agenda for this country. We're following you up and down to be shouting all over the place. Who is going to who's going to get the work done?
And not to be seen as being against the rallies, but even the decorum. Those events are not presidential at all. The way they have chosen to carry them, because they could have a certain way of being set up, but obviously we've turned them into political rallies and sort of entertainment, pandering to the crowds and their need for entertainment. So even if you want it to be the president's level, I think it falls short. Just on that basic level.
Consider what appeared on page 5 of the Standard regarding the tiff we seem to have with Somali. Now, when you hear the tiff we have with Somali, thing in the whole country, even as we speak now, the country of Somali exists. Yes, it has borders, but it isn't one unified state. No. Everybody, there are people who claim certain parts of it and they claim to rule it. And if you actually look carefully, they actually are the ones in charge of the areas. Yes. So one could at best call it a federal entity.
Yes.
But no president makes the utterances that our president is making without adequate provocation. The reality of whatever situation is cannot actually be printed on paper. And you can't say what's really happening is this. You can't. But this isn't the first time that you've had security forces from Somali crossing into Kenya. No, it isn't the first time.
No.
Now remember, when the Kenyan armed forces moved into Somalia, it wasn't that they had any beef with the Somali government or the government in that area. No, the beef was with Al-Shabaab. And where they were housed and where they were and what they were doing at that particular time. That was the beef. And remember, they'd been making incursions into Kenya, kidnapping people, doing this and the other. They said, no. This
one is too much now.
This must be brought to an end. Okay. Different story. But the truth is this. There are very important things right now in this country that any government ought to be grappling with. And any leader that's worth his salt ought to have considered. We go back to flooding, not resolved. The after effect, the aftermath. Locusts, not resolved.
New ones coming.
Schools. Now, imagine if we had a situation like these countries that are shutting down schools and we had to shut down our schools. You know, when schools close, it's a greater burden to parents.
It is.
Immediately. So, there are situations that need to be resolved. There are situations that needs to put this country on a right footing. Now, when out of that situation that any politician would understand, you seem to want to focus your energies on a rally and the relevance that it should bring to you. Wouldn't you say that someone has missed the boat somewhere?
Right.
Yeah, and you somebody's going to say, like I say, take a number because of the things that need attention in this country. Your demands and how somebody should
that would make you look good in the eyes of the citizenry is if you kept addressing things that concern them.
That matter.
This rally, for all intents and purposes, is not going to put food on anyone's table.
It is not going to solve the problem that people have been dogged with for the last 12 months. It's
But
not
it represents
the solution.
a process that has been set in motion that might help us resolve these issues.
Yes.
So therein lies its importance. But instead of even tackling the issues around it, attendance of the president.
I think we're treating it with a little bit of cavalier, attitude, because you do not just demand for the president's attendance just like that. And of what effect would it be so far? as
You
far
know,
as we've been
the
going.
World Bank has promised our counties 20 billion shillings to build helping build health facilities. Okay, I'm sure that people are salivating and thinking,
Fine. Here it is.
Finally.
there is truly a God in heaven. Yes.
God in heaven who is helping us.
Yes.
We're going to take a look at traffic now. We continue with Kenya's biggest conversation. We come back and look at the real estate issue in this country and how dire it is. People not being able to pay their bills. And then again, when the auctioneer's hammer falls, people are not even able to pick up those properties. We want to look at the underbelly of the issue and find out what really is going on. But before that, we take a look at our roads. Five ferries are up and available for service this morning in Mombasa, crossing the Likoni Channel in and out between both coasts. So it will be traffic in a good way, not so bad this morning. If you look right in the middle of Mombasa today, Moi Avenue, not much of a problem. The rains might come down at some point, which would compound traffic, but not too badly. Taking a skip over to Kisumu right now, Obote Road, and then heading out to the airport. Traffic is flowing very smoothly. No incidents or accidents to report there. Back in the capital, in Nairobi, Mombasa Road, of course, we still have rain coming down. The showers making the roads a lot more slippery. And we ask that you want to put your fog lights up because in addition to the rain, the weatherman tells us that the fog is actually quite low. There's an accident on the northern bypass near the Windsor Hotel involving a number of cars. So several have been seriously injured this morning, waiting for emergency services to show up. So approach the area with caution. It's going to affect the traffic on the Greater Thika Road. It's moving slowly though from the Safari Park Hotel all the way to the Pangani underpass. We look at Langata Road now, where we had an issue right around KWS, but that seems to be moving smoothly now. Industrial area is bumper to bumper, chock-a-block from Likoni Road to Enterprise Road and then out to Jogo Road. Spice FM KE, let us know what you see.
Are you ready? Okay.
Spice FM. Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah.
You're listening to Spice FM. Online, mobile, and on radio. www.spiceradio.co.ke. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM,
Nairobi. The Situation
Nairobi.
Room, Ndroko, with Siti Muga and Trix Ngado from the Morning Express on KTN News. We are looking now, shifting gears a little bit and taking a look at what is happening with the real estate sector in this country. There was a bubble that had been blown some time, about 10 years ago, and everybody was rushing, buying properties, buying land, making sure that something could be kept away, tucked away for a rainy day. And the question came about even then, as far back as 2010, and somebody said, the rate at which this thing is moving is going so fast that we expect this bubble to burst at some point. But people said, no, that's not the case. People are still able to afford properties. People are building their own homes. People are taking mortgages, of course, still under 1%, but still. People then had the affordability was there to pick up a mortgage, take up a piece of a business property and use it for yourself. Enter 2020 and things seem to have changed. And it would be, yes, that the economic situation is the pin that has burst the real estate bubble.
Yeah. And we've been given adverse details today on the home and away page. Yeah,
the home and away pullout talks about the real deal in real estate, and one of the big things now is that the auctioneers are stuck with homes that nobody can buy. And previously, we would have seen that this was an issue maybe in the capital alone, and maybe it's some of its dormitory towns that people say, okay, I would be able to take up a mortgage, for example, or start a business. But we see this around the country. And just looking at the next page of that, from Mombasa to Nairobi, to Nakuru, to other parts of the Rift Valley, again back into Kileleshwa, in Thika, properties up for sale through auctions that the auctioneers have been unable to sell, and people having been in a situation where they were unable to pay and then defaulted on loans is the reason why auctioneers stepped in the first place. But then you enter into a compounded situation where who's going to buy them, because the same problems that dogged the individuals who defaulted are the same problems that are dogging those who would essentially want to buy. But people just don't, the buying power has reduced. And of course this points to the floundering economic situation in this country. The real estate bubble has officially burst, and we have to come to terms with
terms with it.
There's something called a speculative fever. A lot of what you've just discussed, what you've just mentioned and discussed, revolves around speculation. People buy land. You'll find there's a rush to buy land in a particular place. Circles buy a huge chunk of land, divide it up, and let their members buy, because there's a need for many Kenyans who belong to the middle class to feel they own property. So you own the land and then you build on it. Now, this is all good and well, but sometimes it needs to be regulated. Because if you don't regulate that speculative spirit, you're also not going to be able to regulate the costs that go with it. People who are profit-driven will look at the demand and say, there are many people who want to own land. So you simply charge whatever you like. I have never heard of any regulatory order that we have in this country that sort of like says, excuse me, land cannot go beyond that. You could call it a free market, yes. But believe me, even the freest of markets are regulated.
Right.
And then there's the question of the interest rate. Remember, in the previous government of President Kibaki, one of the things that that government did, it made credit easily accessible. So people were able to actually access money and were able, and they encouraged you. Interest rates were favorable, all right? Mortgage terms were favorable. If you buy a house and you have a loan and the interest rates are prohibitive, or like recently, the interest cap is sort of like removed and there's talk about regulating it, but it isn't really regulated. It's like a gentleman's agreement. You will not overcharge. And then the banks will do what they do in Kenya. They'll have all these lovely hidden charges that they have. All you require is to default once. Then there is the downward turn of the economy, where you have a situation where the economy isn't doing what it was doing before. So there isn't enough money doing the rounds.
The rounds.
Yes.
There isn't much wiggle room.
Yes, the vortex is low. So if you look at all these things, you find that we will have a problem. And these are not things that are, what I'm discussing is not speculative. It's real.
It's the facts.
Yes, and anybody, it's not just in Kenya. No, it's even worse in economies that have a large proportion of what they do on a daily basis open to what you call market forces. You have a stock exchange. Stocks go up. If you look at the discussion around the coronavirus and you're talking about businesses, it's stocks that people keep discussing. They've gone up and down. In the US, the government decided to intervene and said, we will show these things by reducing interest rates. It didn't encourage people. They went into panic mode. They figured, hiya, if the government is helping us, something must be really wrong. Yes. And now, when that market is playing up and down, the economy suffers. That's why you hear of crashes in the West. We haven't had it. Not really. You have a downward turn because speculation raises prices beyond what is considered reasonable or manageable.
Well, when you had the crash that we saw in the post 2010 in the US, where people had to sell off their houses at throwaway prices, this was what we saw. Now you can imagine that happened still within a regulated economy. Here, the responsibility lies with the regulation. The responsibility of protection for the citizens' money lies within the tenets of regulation. That is not done because people had money. People then were able to access credit in a manner in which, after 2010, in a manner in which they were never able to previously. And the first thing that people ran towards was what they thought was the gold at that time, which was real estate, which was land. Now, to develop that particular piece of land or to make good with that piece of property that you've then bought requires additional funds, and it requires additional resources. But then we find that the economy getting to the point where it has gotten to bent knee status, this then could not take place.
For sure.
People then could not develop. People then could not take more in terms of access to credit. We're not able to. But the protection lies within regulation, and it is clear that people then whose homes have been taken away because they have not been able to pay their loans are the ones who bear the brunt of all of this because of the lack of the regulation.
Yeah. And also the taxman is being accused of
The taxman
playing a
has to be
role in
accused
this.
because-
Take responsibility.
Yes, but
being
on
told,
both
yeah.
fronts, on two fronts rather. One, in the taxes that they levy on the people, but also on not having strong enough incentives that are tax related to
Yes.
ensure that owning a house becomes a benefit to the owner and sort of like
Right.
shields them from some of these things. Because there are taxes that the taxman can exempt people who are homeowners.
Yeah.
If you look at this particular country, with easy access to credit, there are those who argue that the stricter rules were relaxed, but those rules are meant to benefit people.
Yes.
What happens is that many people who get mortgages have a regular income, as in you have a job. So ask yourself, which sectors have been affected? The banking sector itself is laying off people as though it's a growth industry.
While making profit.
Yes, exactly. While
Yeah.
making profit,
The-
something very odd, difficult to understand and explain, but there it is. So if you had a mortgage and you worked for a bank and you don't have a job,
Now
tell me how you're going to pay that mortgage.
How are you going to pay
Yeah.
the mortgage?
If
And
you
it
work,
stretch over years.
yes,
Yeah.
if you're working for the industry that is donor funded and donor funding is cut, it also means employment jobs are cut. What are you going to do?
So, City, you're talking about the need for negotiations with the taxman, or what?
It's a negotiation across the board, meaning even with banks, this rushing to repossess.
Yes.
Ask yourself, are you in the business of selling houses or buying or selling money? Focus on you.
Right.
How do I ensure this person keeps paying,
Paying,
though their
yes.
circumstances are
Have
difficult?
changed drastically. Yes.
That conversation,
It usually
in-
only comes after something has happened.
and they can't sell the
Yes.
house.
And they can't sell the house.
Yeah.
So you will
And the
find
interest has
that they
continued to
then
pile up.
call
They come
upon you and say,
back
actually,
and
you know
we
what, let's
say,
have a
yeah.
conversation and see what we
So
can do about
hypocritical.
this.
Yeah.
But it should be in the very beginning.
They should
Look,
have
someone
foresight
defaults
and-
once or twice, don't call them. Go and see them.
Go and see
Yes.
them.
Because banks
So
have
we have
details of where you
noticed,
work,
yeah.
where you live.
We have
Go and see
noticed
them.
there's a change.
There's a problem here. What is it?
How can we rework the payments?
Yes, somebody may be able to pay less and say, okay, let's restructure this thing
Yes.
so that it makes it easy for you. Once upon a time, I was a headmaster. And I discovered that one of the easiest ways of getting parents to pay fees is let them give you a payment plan. Let them give you. Suggest it, but let them give you. If he was a trader, some could pay you weekly. He may even pay you just a few thousand shillings, 1 or 2,
Yeah.
but it's money you didn't have.
Yes.
If you look at it cumulative, by the time the year ends, he'll have finished paying the fees. And
And
even
you
if he
can move
defaults,
on.
it's on a very small amount.
yeah.
Whereas if you insist on the entire amount, he'll default on the entire amount.
Completely. Yeah.
The banks determine what interest they charge you. And the amount of money that you repay has the interest factored in. It's them who decide the interest. Them.
But City, do you think they do not know that these are options that can be explored?
They do know.
Yeah.
If you consider the billions that banks keep posting
Yeah.
as profits, they know very well. That's why they charge this interest.
That's why
But
they charge the kind of interest
if
that
they
they
hope
do.
to continue doing their business
In
as
the-
banks,
yeah,
all right,
economy.
and not lose it to Safaricom or Saccos, this is something they need to sit and think about, because they really need to rethink banking in Kenya. It has to be rethought completely, and it has to be user friendly.
Because I don't think a lot of these people are just victims of circumstances. The economy is quite bad, so therefore they have no choice but to.
You'd be hard pressed to find, very many individuals who
Who
go
just-
and
yeah.
take these facilities and then decide, well, okay,
Yeah,
I'm not going to pay
yeah.
just because I don't feel
No,
like it. Right?
I'm taking it so that I can default.
So that I can default.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
The likely
not the
case is that
case.
the likely
Yeah.
case is that they ran into a problem here or there, and that what caused the problem in
Pains
terms
them,
of what
yeah.
we've seen a trend from November last year until about now, where we have landlords in the dormitory centers of Nairobi actually reducing rents for
Right.
tenants, because they've also realized that, around people are dropping their prices, number one. Number two, the buying power or the power of affordability for many residents or for many citizens has actually reduced.
Drastically.
So it's either, just like CT saying at this point, it's either you have an empty house where nobody is renting it, or you have something that's consistent
And
over
that's
time.
basically what the banks should be doing. Because
If you're a bank and you consider that, well, the facts, the central bank did a survey and they found that only 41% of Kenyans actually have bank accounts. So it means there are 59. The majority of Kenyans don't have a bank. So what do they do their money? Where do they take their money? It means they take them to facilities and institutions that are a direct challenge to the banks and that business. And if, with time, it appears that those alternative means of managing money will grow at the expense.
Yes.
People move to something that benefits them. We are good at that as human beings. The reason why certain tech-fin companies are what they are is because they offer you a service that suits your purposes. And so even when people talk about high interest rates, no one cares.
Nobody cares. Because it's instant. And
It helps you sort your problem.
now, not in a couple of
These
weeks,
are the
but
details
now.
are not
No
relevant.
forms to be filled and all that bureaucracy.
No, none of that nonsense.
The conversation continues when we come back from this short break, and we look into the details of real estate in this country, property. People are not able to afford it anymore. The bubble has burst. And how are we going to be able to put it back together on different terms? We'll see when we come back.
Chilled Spice. Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
Kenya's biggest conversation. We are discussing issues with real estate this morning. Ndoko in the studio with Siti Muga today, and asking, now that the bubble has burst, and it should be, prescribing here, it should be that there should be tailor-made solutions offered to people who have still some kind of power, but it should come from a negotiation point of view, whereby you're able to say, okay, I can see that you're able to do this over time. Instead of sticking to certain things and a defined interest cap and defined rates by whatever market should be, we should be able to look at the individual cases that people have and say, all right, as the banking sector, as any other financial, institution, to be able to say, we should be able to negotiate. We should be able to look at how it would benefit the both of us. If we're trying to raise the profile of mortgages in this country, for example, and say that they're looking at 1%. It's teeter-tottering between 1% to 2% of people who are able, or who actually have mortgages and are able to own their own homes through this facility. Very, very low. They're trying to raise the number, but you can't do this from a hard stance. It's got to be that you enter into negotiations with people. What then are we able to do? Within reason, of course. But apart from that, this bubble is going to remain burst, and the pieces are going to remain on the ground for a very long time.
All banks claim to look after the interests of their customers. We look after your interest. All manner of phrases that indicate. And there are some who actually live up to the things that they say. They actually do the things. They will talk to you. They understand. They do. But the vast majority, especially the big banks, don't need to. When you have a situation where the country is constantly involved in domestic borrowing, it means they sell the government bonds. Their main clients are banks. Banks buy these bonds. So they mop up liquidity. So you have a situation where there isn't enough money to actually go around.
Yes,
because, and it's more profitable. and you're guaranteed because the government will pay unless the government collapses, which is very unlikely.
Likely to happen.
But the next government that takes over will still pay you. Now, it then means that this customer who walks in, this retail person that they deal with, is really not that important to them. Our banking sector has gone through very many seesaw moments. And in so doing, they've also lost opportunities to actually position themselves as an institution that, in the process of making money, actually looks after the interest of those who help them make money. Because if you're selling money, which is what a loan is, you have to have a buyer. And if the pool of buyers reduce, then that money of yours won't do you very much good. But secondly, that money you lend is also given to you by these very same people who are your customers. They keep it with you. And that's why a huge customer base makes it possible for banks to do the great things they do.
They do.
Yes, because all the money that's resident within their particular boundaries are plenty. Now, the government has regulations, again, that they control. Regulations to make the lives of the citizens easier. Yes. But more than anything else, this profit-driven thought processes that pervade everything that we do must also be tamed. Because it's wild. KRA keeps talking about, well, here we have a situation where we need more money. When was the last time you heard of KRA talking about rebates and certain things that, unless they're things that have existed from time immemorial, like with insurance, health insurance, the way they come out with the statements they make, again, communication. It's as though all they're concerned about is collecting money.
But that is it, isn't it? But that is the case.
No,
that really,
there are other things that KRA
this is what comes
actually
out.
they can do, which they don't, and if they do, they actually don't talk about it, so people don't know. So what we know, or what we hear of often enough, is the constant demand for money. It is stressful. It is very, very, very stressful. No economy on this planet has ever grown by a government overtaxing its people. And if you want to tax, it's a partnership. This person is doing business within the boundaries of Kenya, and part of the duty that you have is to pay your taxes. Make the paying of taxes understandable so that people feel they need to pay. And the way you do it is by ensuring that the services that are already being paid for are provided. But when you have a situation where those services are wanting, and at best, you're always wondering, but what on earth does this government actually do for me except taxing me? That is the perception. It doesn't help.
It doesn't translate either into any kind of reality for anybody, because when you look at the situation as we see it, that people are suffering more than anything. That people, for something that you thought you would be able to do, like own a home or at least pay rent in an area that you would then be able to afford. Have you seen the living conditions of quite a number of people in this country? It's deplorable at best. So if you're talking about a nation protecting its people, protecting its residents, protecting its citizens, something like housing, which, if you want to look at Kenya, is on the Big Four agenda. Something, and affordable housing is affordable is the adjective that's put before housing. That you want to have something that is affordable that people can then live in, as something that they can then enjoy. If you look at KRA and the money that they collect on a regular basis, day after day, month on end, year on year, this money then should translate towards this protection. And when we talk about protectionism, in the provision of affordable housing, for example, but it doesn't. And that's why I'm saying something like this bubble has actually burst, because all of the things that you should have used to keep this bubble in the air as a government actually have not worked. The buying power of people has reduced significantly. The opportunities that people have before them to even enter into any kind of negotiation doesn't exist. We're not even talking about having it reduced over time. What power do people have to that they can actually go to financial institutions and negotiate and say, I can do this? We see that negotiation taking place on a private level, in private sector, where people are now saying, okay, you know what? I've put up this structure. For example, you can come and pay a certain amount. I give you a rebate, for a certain period of time.
The government actually does that. If you look at, for instance, there are items that for the longest time, the government doesn't charge taxes on, like there were some agricultural imports. There are things
or
that
reduce taxes for sure.
Yes, or just eliminate it, meaning this is not you can just bring it in, there'll be no tax. Now, that's incentivizing that particular economy. Remember, a house has components to it. So this sort of rebate would go to manufacturers, for instance, who manufacture building materials. And by the way, those things are many of the things we need for building manufactured locally. Why do people import them? Because they're expensive. So it is cheaper to actually bring them from China, from Taiwan, from wherever it is that people bring these things. But all those things can actually be found locally.
Yes.
If the government, for instance, considers the volume of the business and says, if we want to entice people, why don't we begin by making sure that these products don't cost as much as they do? Meaning, let us reduce taxes on this, because it's the taxes that makes those things expensive. And it's the government that decides how much to tax and when to tax. It's them who decide. Now, if you are thinking of growing any part of your economy, this conversation of what the government should do to incentivize people must take place.
It has to take place.
Yes.
Because if that's not happening, how then are you going to bring people in? How will you bring them into this net whereby you hope across board larger profits can then be realized? You have to, even if it is, you have to give, there has to be a bait. And in this bait, the incentive is we're going to give lower prices, or at least remove the taxes from some areas, so that you as an individual are able to afford. With the way things are going in this economy right now, to say that people don't have the buying or spending power that they did previously, and then to see that certain things are falling up, it seems that the numbers which we had seen, which were already few, if we want to stick to the real estate sector, are actually going to reduce. It's even going to go down a lot further than what we see currently.
There's this small matter of inflation. Okay? In theory, it happens when there are few goods and the demand is greater. So it means the prices do this for you. Many people want it, simply put. There isn't enough of it, but there's money to buy it. Of course, people will charge. Land is finite. It doesn't increase just because you want it. It's there. Now, as the population increases, of course, there'll be greater demand for land. Now, that will automatically increase the value of land. There's hardly anything you can do about that. But you can make that increase reasonable. And then these moves that you hear every Labor Day, the government has decided to give people an increase in pay. That thing is a hoax.
Why is it a hoax?
It's a hoax because the issue of money isn't the quantity, but in the value it can purchase. If 100 shillings could buy me 2 loaves of bread last year, and you increase my pay, and that 100 shillings can buy me 1.5 loaves, it means my money has lost value. So by increasing it numerically, you're not actually doing me a favor. What we should be working on is ensuring that the things we buy with our money are in abundant supply and reasonably priced. How do they do this? That talk of low-cost fertilizer, it helps. You make sure that the inputs that have to do with farming are either tax-free or the tax on them is really low.
It's minimal.
Yes. You help the farmer produce. And you help them produce in large enough quantity so that the produce is plenty and so it's reasonably priced.
This is what we saw when we had an influx of goods coming in from Uganda and other East African nations. But if you want to look at the mechanics of it, the cost input in Uganda is actually very low, and they've been able to see this and understand it. They've made it deliberately so, so that farmers and people in business and the like can actually survive and keep afloat.
Actually, people can live because they can afford the food. You see?
So the input cost is quite low.
That's what the farmer is going to he'll pass on the costs to you, because producing this thing costs them. And they are business people. So why should they, even if they absorb the cost, then it means they should be trading at a loss. Nobody goes into business to lose money. People get into business to make money. Even if I know the government makes utterances about supporting farmers and they have plans, a little ensuring that these plans are implemented would actually go a long way.
Go a very long way.
Yes, because if this actually happened, then you'd find that these prices that keep shooting up, you find the price of milk has shot up, the price of this has shot up. And if you look at it, many of them are actually related to tax very directly.
Yes.
If you increase fuel, it means you've increased the cost of transportation. And very, very directly. If you increase taxes, it means you've actually increased the cost of whatever product was being produced. So all these things, much as the government needs to raise money, a lot more intelligent thinking, planning, and implementing needs to take place, because the government has to raise money. We understand this. They have to tax people. But how do you balance it? Because the livelihood of people is equally important, because it's these people who actually pay taxes. So do you want more people paying taxes which are lower, or do you want
a few people then not being able to
pay taxes at all because they can't afford to pay it, or because the circumstances guarantee that whatever business they're in cannot continue? So there are many discussions that need to be had. And then there's the implementation. The discussions are good. Papers are written. Agreements are arrived at. But the implementation stage, yes. Now, this issue of housing, this isn't going to go away soon.
No, it isn't. I think we are going to see, unfortunately, quite a number of, just because we can feel the temperature as it is, we'll probably see a lot more of cases like this where, auctioneers are coming through and people then are defaulting on some of these loans, because you find that the money that you have has to go towards other things. With the rise in prices, or the rise in taxes, certain things become more expensive. And that means then you have less money to fund and fuel these other things that you should be taking responsibility for. The conversation continues on our social media handles, Twitter and Facebook, Spice FM KE. You can keep talking to us there. We're going to come back and have the gender conversation in a bit. We'll be joined by a commissioner from the National from the National Gender Commission, and we'll also be joined by the Vice President of the LSK in a bit. We come back and the conversation continues. Moving along on Mombasa Road, smoothly, a bit slowly, unfortunately. That's because as far back as Cabanas, there's a hold-up between Cabanas and General Motors. The rain doesn't help issues either. It means that we're moving a lot slowly. It's more slowly than we would expect to be. An incident having an accident having then resulted in crazy traffic on the northern bypass this morning. Use an alternative route if you can, because there is no passing through there. Emergency services are on the scene, but this means that nothing is coming in or going out. Naivasha Road is a mess heading towards the junction. That means that traffic then coming off of Ngong Road today is going to be very, very slow right about now as you try to head towards the city mortuary roundabout. Okay. Then coming off Langata Road, traffic right around KWS, snaking its way slowly to the Timor roundabout, but then you can use Bagathi Way as an offshoot if you don't want to then go through towards Uhuru Highway and the Nyayo Stadium roundabout. Coming out of Westlands on Waiyaki Way, not so bad as you get into the city centre. Very slow, but it is moving all the same. Thika Road, of course, coming off of the Pangani Underpass and then to the Globe Cinema roundabout, not so bad either. Let us know anything that you see, Spice FM KE, or give us a call and we'll keep it moving.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power.
The only way to start your day, I'm Ndroko with CT Muga this morning. Wherever you're tuned in to us, you're listening to Kenya's biggest conversation. Nairobi on 94.4, 87.9 in Mombasa, Nakuru at 96.0, Eldoret on 96.7, 90.9 in Nyeri, Kisumu on 102.5 and Malindi on 97.7. The live stream, you can catch us Spice FM KE on Twitter, YouTube and Facebook. We're going into a different conversation right now. We're going to be joined soon by Priscilla Nyokabi, who is a commissioner with the National Gender Commission and Equality Commission, as well as the newly appointed Vice President of the Law Society of Kenya. We're looking at the gender conversation today and asking ourselves parity, gender parity. What actually does it mean? And then and looking at the LSK as an example of how they put 10 women in 13 out of 13 positions. They made sure that 10 women got those seats, and realizing the influence that women could have when it comes to representation, when it comes to leadership. The gender conversation is going to be quite heated in the next couple of days, of course, coming into March 8th, which is International Women's Day, and looking at the strides that have been made over time when it comes to putting women in leadership, having parity, having gender parity, having equitable distribution of positions when it comes to the gender debate and the gender question. It's about time, I think, we moved beyond asking ourselves, are women adequate? Because that doesn't even come into the conversation. We need to move on to the next level of the conversation, and then in that sense, move on towards action when it comes to what then are we going to do to make sure that we have parity where this is concerned. I am saying we need to move the conversation. We have been stuck for a very long time. Strides have been made. We see that some people have taken this thing by the horn and are keeping it moving. At this point, we need to stop talking and actually start acting.
You know, whenever gender is mentioned, I often feel that one actually needs to start discussing this particular issue by determining what it actually means. Because a lot is discussed, a lot of issues surrounding gender, or at least with the mention the word gender, is become subjects of discussion, and yet I know there's an understanding of what gender is, and there's even agreement of what it means and how it plays out. But whenever people listen to it, do all these people speak from the same voice? Do they read from the same page? Because for many people, for men, you mentioned gender, they think feminism.
Yes.
And not in any positive light. No. In the most negative light you can actually think of.
A bunch of women wagging their tongues and making noise over
actually,
issues that are not issues.
They take it further. A bunch of women who are going to be a bad influence on other upright women who know their place in society.
Before we go deeper into this conversation, CT, today's proverb, yes. Coming from you, remind us what that is again.
Well, essentially, you're saying you use your tongue to count your teeth. Yes, exactly. The meaning of that particular proverb isn't difficult to figure out. Yes, but it's appropriate.
It is appropriate.
Because
it seems that along the lines of everything that we've been discussing today, or what we see before us, it is appropriate to have that discussed. Right. Continuing with the gender discussion, it seems that some groups are able to get it right. We're going to be joined by Caroline Kamende, who is the newly appointed Vice President of the Law Society of Kenya. She'll be with us in a short while, but the LSK seems to have gotten it right. And apart from having the discussion and saying, and this is, I think, call me a feminist, but this is now where we move beyond having the discussion.
You asked me to call you a feminist. Okay, I know what you're saying.
Thank you. See, so apart from just talking, and this is why I'm saying we need to break this cycle of having the discussion where something can actually be done about it. There are several spheres in society whereby you see that you can actually start to see that representation take place by action as opposed to just speaking. the folks at the LSK didn't just sit around and say, well, actually, I'm going to wait until somebody gives me permission and then I'm going to go ahead and put my name on the ballot. No, here is my name. Here are my credentials. Here is what I can do. Let's move forward with this thing, as opposed to waiting for somebody to give me something or give me a position. Or actually, I don't think I can sit or put my name forward because, there are a number of men there and I feel inadequate. Or I think that something special needs to be done for me. Then in order for me to go and then put my name there. No, put your name there. Tell us what you're able to do, and then see if people can vote for you. And look at the result that we got from this. Overwhelmingly, out of 13 positions, 10 women were voted in. It was not that they were given. It was not that any favors were done. They put forward what they thought their capabilities were. And guess what? People voted them in, and they have this position for the next period of time. And that's what I'm saying. We need to go beyond just the talking. I think about it sometimes and I say, we can't be in this please help me stance for so long. This has been the case, and it's got to be towards some kind of proactive movement. Put your name there. Put out your credentials. Tell people what you are able to do. Let it be clear. Let it be transparent. Let it be real. They will make a decision based on what you have put out there, rather than sit in the shadows or in the corner hoping that somebody's going to take notice. And I think we've done ourselves a disservice in very many occasions, as opposed to putting ourselves out there and letting the rays of people's attention fall on us. We sit in the corners and we say, okay, yeah, well, maybe they'll see me, or maybe somebody will do me a favor. And I'm saying the time for that, it ended a minute ago.
The social conditioning that societies have on both men and women, both girls and boys, it's something that's rather difficult to shake off. How do you think, for instance, things like caste systems remain in this day and age in the 21st century? People talk about it being muted. People talk about it not being as strong as it was. The truth is, it still exists because it's in the mind. And it stays there. And remember, when someone is in a certain position and they've been in for some time, it's considered normal. One doesn't then proceed to question it and ask, what is it about this? The sort of questions that you would ordinarily ask and the things you'd ordinarily want to find out, you won't bother with because you fit in. You find how to cope within that particular system. And just like you found, then you will know your way about that system. Now, change then requires you to move out of this new system and move on to a new one that you're not familiar with. Therein lies the difficulty. And when you get accustomed to something, it's with the good and the not so good that you get accustomed to.
True.
Yes. And you consider it to be normal. Like someone tell you this is what men do or this is what women do. And you ask, why? Something as simple as wearing trousers. It has been a subject of debate for the longest of time. Now, people forget that in an ancient time, in the absence of trousers, almost everyone wore some form of skirt or dress.
Men too.
That's what I said, everyone. Some form. And the mini did not come with 1960s. The sort of garments that people wore, whether they were made of skin or bark cloth or whatever it was, it fitted the purpose of the day. If you're in the tropics, you didn't need anything heavy to cover you. You just needed something to basically cover certain aspects of your nakedness. In parts where they had nice, balmy weather and then really cold times, then you made sure that you had some sort of, but again,
something warmer,
these were norms. We resist change even within ourselves. And this is what probably makes this gender discussion what it is, because it talks about change and talks about the need for change.
So it's not really then an issue of inadequacy on the part of women, because women are the ones who have not entered into the sphere of things as far as things are rolling. And previously it was that there was a place where women had been assigned to.
And men had also been assigned certain positions. And so if you sort of like made a foray into that arena that was considered someone else's turf, now that's where now this discussion of feminism, in fact, feminism, if you look at it, the movement was to try and say, no, these roles that have been assigned to us, they're not working well for us, because it actually puts us at a disadvantage. Remember, girls not being educated, women being paid less than men in places of employment. they were real concerns that were being talked about.
Right.
Yes. And the thing is, remember, someone who's in a position of privilege will not necessarily want to change. And for purposes of even further discussion, the people who were in a position of advantage were men. And they have been for the longest time.
For the longest time. But the thing is, to make the change then, the change is in one side where it has to be more proactive, and on another end where it has to be accepted that we're moving into waters that we were not used to before, and saying, you know what? It is necessary for you to accept the change while we are also making the change. And I think that is something that then does not come into conversation a lot, because there has to be an acceptance that things are not going to happen in the way in which they were. And that's what I'm saying. It shouldn't come from a begging. It shouldn't come from a begging stance.
Change doesn't come about because it's been asked for. People tend to resist change. Yes. When people change speedily, it's because they've seen the attendant benefit and it's clear. Then they don't need someone to invite them or tell them to change. They will change because they can see. If it isn't clear, or if they feel it's going to disadvantage them, they will resist it.
They will resist the change.
Yes.
Right.
And they will resist even more the people who are advocating for the change.
For the change.
Yes.
We're joined in the studio right now by Caroline Kamende, who is the newly appointed Vice President. Elected. Who is the newly elected Vice Chair of the LSK. Karibu sana. Good morning.
Good morning. Apologies.
Well,
Okay.
we welcome you to the studio.
Thank you.
And we thank you for making the time to come.
Thank you.
We know how Mombasa Road can be.
It's crazy.
And yes,
It's crazy.
yes, I think it's even more dangerous than visiting a game park with wild animals.
Yes. Thank you.
Karibu sana.
I'm glad to be here.
Thank you for coming. We're having the gender conversation continues, the gender agenda, as it were, over time, and asking ourselves very many questions about in the run up to International Women's Day and making certain celebrations, and asking ourselves, should we move on? And we saw very clearly, and using the example of the LSK recently held elections, asking ourselves, why is it that then we had a group of women who independently decided or collectively decided that we are not sitting back and saying, okay, maybe we wait for something to be handed out to us as a token. But here we are and seeing that out of 13 positions that were essentially up for grabs, women dominated in 10. Not sitting back and waiting for somebody to hand out something to us. How did this happen, Caroline?
It's not a secret that women have been traditionally marginalized in leadership positions. So at this time round, I think the ladies in the Law Society of Kenya took the courage to vie. And the primary consideration was competence. So it's the members of the Law Society comprising of both men and women, chose women on competence. There were, if I could give the statistics, there were more men or gentlemen in the race than ladies for the various positions. And in an electoral process that members exercised their will and elected more ladies. I currently serve in the current council. We still had a big number of ladies in the current council. Only that this time around we've added the number to 10. One of the ladies, a senior member, was unopposed. So those who were elected at the ballot are 9. So for me, that ladies have now taken up the leadership competition is a good sign. Yes.
You say that there were more men than women vying.
Yes, for the various positions, there were more. Other than the presidency, where there were 2 male and 2 female candidates, and for the position of VP, we were only 2 of us, a male and a female. The general member had 7. General member representative position had 7 male contestants as against 2 ladies. The coast representative, that is the one that had 2 female and 1 male. And the disciplinary committee had all 4 male contestants. The upcountry representative had 9 male contestants and 3 female. In the general upcountry, all the 3 female went in. They only got an additional 1 male winner. In the Nairobi representative, there were 9 male contestants and 5 ladies. 3 ladies went in. The position did not attract any male winner. So in the LSK membership by gender, this does not mean that the people who made it, the ladies who made it, were elected by the ladies. Because the ladies are, as of 2019 December, the female population in terms of gender in the law society are 73-64. That makes up for 44%.
Okay, so if we can look into the details, and we're going to take a break right now, then come back and look into the details because it's clear, as you said, women did not necessarily vote for women.
Yes.
You had men voting for women as well.
Yes.
A change that's likely to be the winds blowing in terms of change in this country, perhaps? We'll take a look when we come back. 'Still experiencing showers in many parts of Nairobi. Cloudy skies through the day, highs of 26 and lows of 15. In Nyeri today, 17 degrees, cloudy skies through. It'll open up a little bit to highs of 26 and lows of 14. It's partly cloudy conditions in Kisumu. Rain expected later with highs of 29 and lows of 19. In Malindi, cloudy conditions at 26 degrees, carrying through the day with highs of 32 and lows of 26. Partly cloudy conditions in Nakuru with highs of 27 and lows of 14. In Mombasa, cloudy conditions as well through the day. Showers were expected later with highs of 32 and lows of 27. It's clear skies in Eldoret with highs of 24 and lows of 13. In Kampala, mostly cloudy today. Rains and thunderstorms expected later with highs of 27 and lows of 21. In Dar es Salaam, cloudy skies, rain expected, showers with 31 the high and lows of 24. And finally on the continent in Lagos with partly cloudy conditions at 27 degrees, showers in the afternoon with highs of 34 and lows of 27.
.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Sugar and spice and everything nice. Spice FM.
Spice up your life.
This is Kenya's biggest morning conversation. Mornings done right here in the Situation Room on Spice FM, where you're tuned in Nairobi and online, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Spice FM KE. We're having the gender conversation today. Joined in the studio with the newly elected Vice Chair of the Law Society of Kenya, Caroline Kamende, with us this morning and discussing issues having to do with gender parity, and saying as the conversation then heats up in the country, around the world, and people are talking about gains that have been made in the fight for equal representation for women, whether it be at levels in society or levels in government, and asking ourselves the question quite regularly, women representation, are we seeing a time now where it's going to take the country or society by storm?
The 2/3 gender role on composition of the membership of any body has been an issue. And it's not a women issue at all. It is an issue that is of constitutional imperative. So for me, that we are now moving where ladies, more women, are taking up the courage to vie for competitive leadership positions is one way of achieving this constitutional principle that has been litigated on for long. And what the Constitution did not do, it did not provide for a for guidelines on how to implement this. There's been a lot of litigation on this issue, and what we are now seeing is that women are taking up the courage to vie for this position because it is not being handled at the constitutional bodies that should deal with that.
What stopped us before? What stopped women before from taking up these roles?
I think it's the historical injustices, and more specifically, I think this is the elective positions in both public bodies and private bodies have been taken up by men. I think just the courage to take up those positions, because most ladies will feel that this is a male-dominated area, and we have been retrieving from taking up these positions.
Why did you put yourself up for election at the LSK?
I tried in 2016. I failed. Then I took a back. I decided I'm not going to vie. But in 2018, I took the courage again, vied, and I won. And in I realized that I am a leader. I can lead, and I can do what any other gender can do, male and female. So in 2019, I took the challenge. I said, let me go for a higher post, and I made it. So I think for me, it's the courage and also confidence that we put ourselves out there. I know ladies also, we fear the murky waters. But I just decided to venture in, and for me, I'm happy. I'm also happy about the composition in the current council. I must also say that members of the Law Society exercised their free will in an electoral process, and the primary consideration, as I said earlier, was competence. So it does not mean that the other male contestants were not competent, but I think members found ladies were more favorable in the ballots.
I don't want to water down this achievement, because research even in this country has found that many employers actually prefer to employ women. They are considered to be loyal, they are considered to be reliable, and they are considered to be almost industrial activity free. They don't go around going on strike. The only time the employer may have a complaint is when they're expectant. But having said that, that's why I asked for those figures. Would you not say that the men very generously divided the votes among themselves, because many of them stood? So in so doing, they gave the ladies a fairly nice opportunity, because if all the ladies sort of like supported their candidates and the men divided their votes among their candidates, the ladies were more likely statistically to
land on something.
I don't think so. Like if you look at my position, for example, we were only two of us. We were a lady, that is myself, and a gentleman. If you argue that all ladies voted for ladies, then that would be wrong, because I think in the history of this country, the LSK, I got the most votes, almost 4,000 votes. That means that I got votes from both male and women in the society, because I had 3,925 and 75 votes.
That's 4,000.
That's 4,000 as against my opponent's 1,800. If you look at the ladies in the presidency, if you also add their votes, you still find that the male candidate was way ahead. So really, I think members made a resolute decision at the ballot, regardless of the gender. Yes.
So can we see that it translates that for the top position, people, across board, are still comfortable then with a man? Because if you...
No, wait. Are they comfortable with the man or are they comfortable with this individual?
I think they are comfortable with the individual. Because unlike the constitutional requirement that under Article 250(11), that in the constitutional commissions we should have one, if the chair is a man, then the vice should be a lady. We do not have that in the LSK structure. So to me, it was members were more comfortable, or rather voted for the member that they needed them to lead the society. So on competence and probably persuasion during the campaigns. I don't think it was more of the gender.
So that's what I was going to ask. Just does the gender role take any kind of precedence here and saying that, we need to see women coming in to take up these positions, or it doesn't even feature at all? Whereas if you look at the country profile, the national profile of this, it's often that there's more agitation for gender representation when it comes to leadership. Did that play out in this sense? Because many have said that this example can then be used to translate to national government and see how they can also take this gender fight to those doors.
For me, in the law society, the just concluded elections, I really do not think that the gender card played at all. Because like I give an example of my position, and I also give the statistics of the number of eligible voters in terms of male and female. We have more male members of the society that translate to 56% as at 2019 December than the female. And in some of these positions, if gender was to play, then we would have had more men or all ladies, because the voting required that they choose 2 or 3 representatives. So if members were to choose ladies, then we would have a uniform representation from all ladies. If we use the same number that voted, we would also have had all male representatives. But I think members here chose. There was a resolute decision. Because you can see, if you also look at the results, the margin between the candidates, both male and female, shows that there was stiff competition. So in some categories, you would a member would be required to vote for 4, 3 or 2. So for me, if gender was to play a card, then we would have had a uniform representation all through. So I don't think gender was really a factor, because if there is more men in the membership, then I would not have got this position. That means that I was voted in by both men and women who believed in me.
On the basis of your competency.
Competence, yes.
Right.
Yes. And during the campaigns, one of the key issues was scorecard. So you find that most the members have gone back. Not all of us have gone back. So we had to really show members and prove that we need to go back. So we've had only ladies going back to their respective positions. I think 4 or 5 of us are going back.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I were to ask this question, in the history of the LSK, what would you say are some of its greatest achievements?
I think one of the greatest achievements the Law Society is to guide the courts, and especially during the constitutional dispensation, and also to develop the law, and also to develop the rule of law in terms of PIL cases that LSK has taken up in line with the objectives under Section 4. I think the lawyers and the Law Society played a key role in the transition from the old constitution to the new constitution in terms of creating jurisprudence and interpretation of the constitution. All those Supreme Court advisory are usually done, or the foundation of lawyers So I think the Law Society has achieved that mandate. Yes.
Okay, we're going to take a break and take a look at the roads right now and see how traffic is looking on this rainy morning. And then we'll come back as we discuss going deeper into the gender discussion this morning. We'll be joined on the line by Priscilla Nyokabi, who is a commissioner with the National Gender and Equality Commission, and have a little bit more insight into where we are going with the gender discussion in the country. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. You're in the Situation Room this morning. All right, yes, quite blocked on Mombasa Road this morning, getting into the city centre, not as quick as we'd expect to see it. The showers are still coming down, so it's crazy, guys. And on Jogo Road today, all the way from Makadara to the city centre, is quite the chock-a-blocked situation. Now, looking at Donholm Outer Ring Junction, gridlocked today, realising that this is again because of the rain. On Mombasa Road, on Thika Road, using the eastern, northern and southern bypasses might get you stuck today. We already have an accident on the northern bypass. Gong Road is a mess, and we're trying to see Thika Road then coming into the city centre, a mess as well. Now coming down into the city centre from Gong Road, Naivasha Road, heavy traffic around Nyeri Road today, and it looks like everywhere we look it is a bumper to bumper situation. Here we're going to have to exercise patience, folks, because that's what we need to be able to get through this. Really nothing much that we can do once you're there. If you can avoid the areas where we've seen there's a mess, please do. If you have an alternative, share with us so that we can share with everybody else and keep it moving this morning.
Online, on digital, and on radio. This is Spice.
This is Kenya's biggest conversation in the room today. Ndoko Siti Muga, and joined by the newly elected Vice Chair of the Law Society of Kenya, Caroline Kamende. And on the line today with us, Priscilla Nyokabi, the Commissioner with the National Gender and Equality Commission. As we go further into the discussion, Priscilla, good morning.
Good morning. I'm so sorry. I would have used a border were it not for the rain.
I know it's the rain and the traffic compounding things today, but we have you online, so that works as well, right?
Thank you.
So the conversation continues, and we're asking ourselves as we're rounding about and going towards looking at gender parity, equality, equal representation. I'm going to start with you now, Priscilla. When we talk about parity, what exactly are we looking at?
Gender parity is the higher threshold because gender parity is 50-50. So equal representation for men and women. It might take us a little bit longer to get to gender parity. It is in our constitution in the employment arena, especially the public service, that the public service should go for gender parity. But in leadership, the negotiated threshold was the 2/3 gender rule, so that neither gender exceeds 2/3 of the representative slot or the leadership slot. But gender parity is where we are going. It will take us a bit of time to get there. We need to first get onto the 2/3, and then once we are on 2/3, then we can continue making steps towards gender parity.
It seems like it's a discussion. It's still being talked about, this 2/3. Is it possible?
We are putting a lot of effort now with the constitution review exercise because we got it in the constitution without the formula. So what we need now are the formulas that allow us to go for it. And there are two ways. One is the quota system, what we have of the special seats. And that is because culture and many problems with our electoral system and many problems with our traditional ways of looking at women don't allow us to get to the equal step, as it were. Then the other one is proportional representation, where you have an electoral system. You elect the party, and then people just kind of, move party, and you don't elect individuals.
Right.
So that way, and in countries like South Africa, the electoral system has made it much easier for women to be able to be elected. The first past the post, which is what we have here, is a very, very difficult process for women. First past the post. I mean, if we were running today with a man, they would by now have the seat. Me, I have a baby in the morning. I have other, biological roles and family roles. And I also have other challenges traditionally. So that first past the post does not look at other criteria that you need for the purpose of leadership.
Right.
So the formulas now, and that's why we are in the BBI process. BBI process might culminate into a constitutional bill or a constitutional review exercise. If that's going to happen, then we as women are going to ask that the formulas are put in the constitutional document. You don't leave Parliament to do that. We've seen it's very difficult for Parliament. Just let's have the formula in the Constitution.
But Priscilla, we've talked about competence, and joining the conversation, we have Caroline Kamende, who's here with us, talking about the fact that they presented themselves. And here it is where they had a track record of being able to have a scorecard that worked. And upon this is where people were able to make the decision to put them into positions of office. Just taking the LSK as an example, do all of these traditional setbacks or hiccups that you've talked about just now, past the post and such, do they really stand in the way if women, let's say, are presenting their credentials? Or are we saying that it's different when we look at society and when we look at national government?
Well, we are very happy about the LSK, and congratulations to Caroline and team for the big win that they have had. I mean, everybody's quite excited. But Caroline and I remember just not very long ago, this conversation of not more than 2/3 was with the LSK. Ahmed Nasir Abdullahi, who was then chairman of the Law Society, and actually at his time of election, this particular conversation we are having now, just about 10 years ago, we were having it at the LSK because at the time, we didn't have as many women elected. And so what it means is that, which is also our view, that the quotas are not permanent. You use them for the purposes of now showing the competence, showing those other criteria that then lead to your election. Otherwise, this conversation we are having now was a motion with the Law Society of Kenya members in an AGM, asking them to have slots for women in terms of the council and in terms of leadership. But even the LSK itself, you will find that we have only had one woman president.
Why is that?
Even as progressive as we are, we have only had, so that it is a journey. Now that Caroline is vice chair, and we've had quite a number of vice chairs who are women. I think that we had the other vice chair, Harriet Chigai. So the ceiling is not broken yet. We've come a long way. But we still need to get to the very top, which is the presidency. And so this conversation around empowerment of women and around the quotas is still very valid. Because I belong also to the ICJ, the International Commission of Juries, Kenya section, and another lawyer's body. I don't even think we've had a woman president at all. But even more importantly, when you go into an election on another lawyer's body, you find that it is not as easy. We are only 2 women on that council, 3 women, and 1 woman has had to be brought in by the 2/3 gender rule. So the rule is a platform. It is not a permanent step. We get onto the platform, we are able to show our competence, and then after that we can get elected. And I'm hoping that Caroline now, they also move forward now to the presidency and to also good leadership, so that in the next election we can even have the seats retained.
So is that in plan, Caroline? And as we continue with Priscilla, of course, is that in plan, Caroline, to say that, or do you see this as a stepping stone towards being able to have some kind of representation at the very top for women?
Yes, and let me start by saying that what Priscilla says is true, that we have not had, other than Rachel Omamo in 2001 to 2003, we have not had a lady as a LSK president. But I must commend Madam Maria Mbeneka and Harriet Chigai. They took up the courage and they vied for the position of LSK presidency. That is a good sign that we are also on the way to breaking the ceiling, because we have not had personally, from my 16 years that I've been an advocate, I've not had or seen any lady dare vie for that seat.
Dare to even vie?
To even vie for that seat. So the Mariam Beneka and Harriet Chigai have also given us and shown us that it is possible to even win that position. For me also, it's not also about gender, like I've said before. It's about competence. I'm not trying to say that the two ladies were not competent. What I'm saying is that members exercised their will at the ballot. But it is a good sign. There's light at the end of the tunnel. So I think ladies are now more courageous to take up these elective positions. Yes. So to me, for now, I want to ensure that I serve members and I showed them that their vote of confidence, because I got most votes, that gives me and puts a bigger liability on my shoulders to serve members. If I serve them well, I'm sure they will be able to vote me in again for either the presidency or even the vice president. Vice president, yeah. But I'm aiming to go higher.
Higher.
Yes.
Priscilla, can we see this translated to the national level? What we're saying now, that if it is based on competence, then why don't we have more, if it is a competence thing? Because we've seen an example here that, people voted based on your scorecard or what they have seen that you have been able to do. Why can't we then see that translate at the national level?
No, that's where we have a problem. We've got a big disconnect between what is happening in the professional world and what is happening in the political world. I mean, I would want somebody like Caroline now to consider vying in her own constituency. She's already been vice president. She needs to do what Kajuju did. Kajuju was vice president of the Law Society, and then she went and vied in Meru. But even she vied on the women rep seat, which is, it's still something to vie. So the conversation now for the women who've been elected and women who've led, even Harriet, Maria Beneka, who have really done a fast by vying for the presidency, I think that these are the women that we need now in our political space. But then that political space is so untidy and so bad for women. Many people will not get into it. Nobody would want to compete with some of the men that we have in the arena and the type of competition they put you through. If it was a competition for competence, for your points, for your vision, a competition on what you can do, and a competition on what you can deliver, now that's a fair competition. That's not what we get in politics. In politics, you get a mad world, Unatupa tu matope, right, left, and center, And the more matope you throw, is like the more the vote. So that is why this effort of cleaning the electoral system is an effort. And I'm hoping that Caroline, and who knows about other things as well, sexual harassment in the workplace, there are many other things that affect women. And you can imagine if there's sexual harassment in the professional world, there's much more of it in the political world.
Right.
And so this effort of cleaning the electoral environment is the first place of call. When the electoral environment is a little cleaner, and now you can come onto a platform where you share your vision, where you share what you can do, I think we're going to see more women elected. And to encourage the women who have a platform to use that platform as a stepping stone, so that they use the LSK now to get onto the national leadership.
What would you say are the efforts that have been made, say, by the ICJ and the LSK towards cleaning up not only the image of our electoral process, but ensuring that the actual process is clean, not just the image?
Yeah, good effort has gone on and good effort has gone into it, but there's still some distance to be covered. For example, on implementation of Chapter 6. If we had the leaders in the political environment conform and comply with leadership and integrity credentials as envisaged by the Constitution, that would have been much better. Because now, for someone like me who contests, you really get it rough. People even sexually harass you on the campaign trail. You get insults, your family is brought into it, your husband and children. You are abused not for the things that you can do. I got a baby just before the election, and it became such an issue, And the baby is not vying, I'm just like, my God, what the hell is this now? And you can't convince people that you can be a mother and a leader. And so that cleaning, there is a cleaning that is gender sensitive that still needs to be done. We need to clean the electoral system properly so that IEBC is strong and voted as they are. But one of the other things that we need is the political party primaries. Remember, the problem isn't just at the election. There's a big problem with our party primaries. So either we allow IBC to come on to party primaries, or we get a cleaner way of doing party primaries. You've seen party primaries are even panga na shoka. You show up with a panga and shoka, literally, So that party primary, upon your kazi. The reports have done well. We have some democracy. I mean, we're not complaining that much. In a house that, for example, has the 47 women reps, has the 24 elected women, but if you do 24 out of 290, that's just about 7%. So you can see the distance that we have. 3 senators out of 47 senators, that is 6%. 3 governors out of 47, that is 6%. In fact, they're saying if we go at the pace we are going, it will take us 100 years.
Well, but,
we don't have 100 years, we need to move a little faster. So more effort is still required.
We're on the line with Priscilla Nyokabi, a commissioner with the Gender and Equality, the National Gender and Equality Commission, and in the studio with Caroline Kamende, who is the newly elected vice chair of the Law Society of Kenya. We're going to take a break, but the conversation continues. I'm going to ask you to stay on the line, Priscilla, as we continue with this, because then looking at the reasons as to why then the problem seems to be as deep as it is. And are we scaring other women from coming on board if we look at how bad the situation is right now? Don't go away. We'll be back in a short bit.
Spice FM. Spice up your life. Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah.
You're listening to Spice FM. Mature, intelligent talk.
In the Situation Room today, we are looking at the gender conversation, discussion, and going as deep as possible to see right around coming again to another International Women's Day and saying beyond the conversation, what exactly is being done. In the studio with us today, Caroline Kamende, who is the newly elected vice chair of the Law Society of Kenya, Siti Mugo, myself, Nduoko, and on the line with us, Priscilla Nyokabi, who is a commissioner with the National Gender and Equality Commission. And we're going into this now. And Priscilla, I hear from Caroline that, regardless, we said we're going to go forth, regardless of whatever stereotypes may be there, whatever may have been said and done. Is it different if we're looking at it on the national scale and saying, would women have a harder time with all these roadblocks that seem to pop up, according to what you're saying?
Well, I think the first thing, which is what I agree with Caroline on, is that you have to vie. We must present ourselves. Even before anything else, I think we must fight the cobwebs and we must fight the barriers in our own heads and the barriers around us, at personal level. Because it takes a lot of courage for you to vie. It takes a lot of courage for you to present yourself as a candidate. I think it took a lot for Caroline to go for vice chair, for Harriet and Maria Beneka to try for the presidency. It takes a lot. So the first win is the self-battle. We win that self-battle because even if you look at the national level, we have about 1,000 women candidates and 14 or 15% get elected. We have like 10,000 men candidates and 14 or 15% get elected. So what it means is that if more women vied, we would have more women elected. There are counties where they would want to elect a governor woman, but there is none on the ballot. All the persons on the ballot are male. So we can't even know whether that county would ever elect a woman because there was none in the contest. So I think the first big battle for us women is going to be to vie. We must vie and vie and vie. Actually, in our presentation for nomination seats, we were even proposing that the nomination seats should go to women who tried first. They should go to women who vied already, so they came some distance. And that way it means you have some popularity, you have learned how to present yourself on the podium, you have learned to have a vision, how to convince people on that vision. So the first step is the self and is the vying. But then the other one is the sort of issues we need in terms of law, so preparing yourself with the legal knowledge, because the processes are also very legal. And then the other one is going to be the skills that we now need on the national platform. Because eventually, even when we get onto the national platform, you find that the women candidates are other. Kuna farasi wawili, the usual, na punda wengine wanasimama. So we women have tended to be in the punda category. It is time we presented ourselves to the farasi, we elevate ourselves to the farasi situation. So the skills we learn from bodies like LSK are important, but there is a lot more sharpening and a lot more, because also the numbers. In LSK you are talking to 10,000, sort of sophisticated group. In the national platform, you're talking of thousands of voters. I mean, in a constituency, in counties like Nyeri, you're talking of 500,000 registered voters that you have to convince. So we just need to use the skills we have, but sharpen those skills some more, and work in partnership. Another thing we have lacked is the sisterhood. So that the sisters in one space can help the sisters in another space. Like now with the BBI process, I'm hoping that the sisters in LSK are going to come out strongly to make sure that process delivers some gains for women.
Right. Caroline, do you see that this position or this process that you've gone through recently has primed or would prime you or any other woman to be able to get into, even if we're talking about national politics later on?
Yes, I think I agree with Priscilla that you need the skills, because this was a very rigorous campaign trail. And the skills would be how to engage members. What I saw working was one-on-one engagement. And that is the same skills that you need for national platform to campaign. Of course, I will also agree with Priscilla that there are those biological roles that with people with children, like in these campaigns, I know there was a lady who had just delivered before the elections and she was not able to travel. So to me, but that is not a bar from going for the seat. Once you put your name up there, you have a responsibility also to campaign and campaign harder, convince members. So for me, is the skills, and you also, this was a professional campaign, but you still have to go down to every town, engage members, convince them, tell them I'm the right candidate. We also had forums like debates where we were all exposed to the same questions and engagement. For me, other than competence, you also need to learn how to engage members and convince. For someone to, it's uniform for somebody to vote for you, whether in the national platform, professional platform, or any other platform. You also need to do a lot of convincing. You need to tell them, this is what I've done, or this is what I'm capable of doing if you're a new entrant. So for me is also a lot of hard work. I had to brave many cold nights. I had to leave my children behind, my family behind. So for me, it's also hard work because I think I traversed the whole of this country. Yes, which now is can also make me vie for a national position because now I have learned the skills. Go down there, go to the roots, talk to members.
You have an understanding of it. I have a feel for it, really.
Yes. So what one needs to do is to come up with a strategy and map out where votes are and where voters are. Whether they're professional, they are normal wananchi, you still have to go and do a lot of convincing. But I think also you also have to get a hard skin because you will have all this thing mad thrown at you.
Let me ask this question.
Yes.
When you're campaigning for a position in the LSK, you're talking to fellow lawyers, aren't you?
Yes.
People of similar background in training, similar way of looking at life, really. But do you apply the same thoroughness when it comes to thinking about national positions as to understanding the voter, why they do what they do? See, all these things we say, the insults, the way they treat you. the question that comes to mind, is it the men who do this against the women? Do also women do this against other women? But there's a layer of the land that we refer to as national politics. How much time do you invest in actually understanding that this particular game, this is how it is played, so that you're prepared adequately for it? Because from what I heard, that many ladies who vie for national positions get surprised and shocked, which tells me you're not prepared. Because it's either, if you're going to go into it, you understand the lay of the land. The need to change things, I understand, takes time. But if you don't fully understand what it entails, and those insults and those things that we talk about, it's part of it, then it probably points to your unpreparedness. Is that a fair statement coming from me?
I will look at it this way. First and foremost, you will, because it's a competition.
Yes.
You will get all manner of insults or mud thrown your way in favor of your opponents. And for me, you must first make the decision to vie. When you throw yourself out there, you have to say, I will deal with whatever comes my way. So, because it's still an election, whether it is a professional election or not, you will still get opponents, people throwing those distasteful words.
Even in a professional election?
Even in a professional election.
So it's representative in a way of the national platform.
Precisely.
So Priscilla, are women unprepared as you look at this? Are they unprepared?
No, I wouldn't say that, because, the things we do, we lead our family. So we've been preparing for life, I mean, we make very serious decisions at home. And we make very far-reaching decisions. A lot of women now make decisions even on investment at home.
Right.
And make sort of leadership, small Christian community, the market committee, PTA, our Parents Teachers Association meetings are really mostly by mothers. Fathers were hardly playing any role there. So we are prepared in the sense of the space that we occupy and the decisions we have to make routinely.
Right.
I think what we are unprepared for is the level of I don't know what I can do to tell you. I was a lawyer, for example. I was prepared to confront insults on my family and all. But also the amount of money you have to give in the national space, you are prepared for that. I don't think anyone can prepare you for that.
Nobody can.
No amount of preparation can help you with that. And then the other one also is that, patriarchy is a system. You find that within the party ranks, there are a lot of liberal men who now want to allow women space. But there are also a lot of patriarchs. So you are sometimes unprepared for the level of hostility within your own party that you're going to face. Party does remain unconvinced on women candidates. If, for example, the party, look at the example of Nairobi, where we have 17 constituencies, and we have, this one has traditionally been a Jubilee seat, this one has traditionally been a CORD seat. So like Kibra has traditionally been a CORD, position, the Kibra area. They are very, if you present yourself as a woman, the party leader thinks, so now he wants me to lose the seat, It doesn't seem as one who can help him to win the seat.
Right.
He just sees how he is now risking the seat because a woman candidate has come on. So that level, the hostility, you are unprepared on the hostility, and you are unprepared on the money. But in terms of being a good candidate and convincing people, that we have years of preparation around. In the other roles that we play. Within the leadership.
I'm going to ask to keep you around for another 10 minutes or so, Priscilla and Carolyn, to just look at then strides that we're going to make to see how we can actually make these strides towards, getting to that place where we say it's equal, if at all possible. We're coming around to 8 o'clock. We're going to look at traffic and come back and continue with this conversation. Looking at it a little bit better on Mombasa Road. The shower is still coming down right around many parts of the city. Mombasa Road still moving quite slowly, getting into the city. A lorry has overturned, unfortunately, on the service lane on Thika Road, Muranga bound, and that is outbound. So outbound, we have a problem. Police are on site trying to sort that out. So approach with caution if you're in that area. Langata Road, quite a number of police on the road this morning. We don't know if somebody is going somewhere, but this means that we're moving slower. The roads are are slippery, folks. So you ask that you actually slow down to avoid what we've seen today. I think we have a total of 4 accidents so far on our roads this morning. The junction on Gong Road is dire in terms of the traffic situation. Feeder roads, Naivasha, Nyeri, Riara and Kingara roads have been turned into parkings, unfortunately, with the traffic that we see right now. Getting a bit worse because of the roads being slippery. Let us know what you see. So Jogo Road heading into town, the traffic is crazy all the way from Makadara, and then getting into the city center a little bit slower, but you'll get there eventually. Exercising patience is what we're practicing this morning. Spice FMKE, reach us on Twitter, give us a call, let us know what you see to keep moving.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latin, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is
you can
the
continue this conversation with us on live streams on social media, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Spice FMKE, you're in the studio this morning with myself and your co-host C.T. Muga, and we're joined by Caroline Kamende, who is the newly appointed vice chair of the LSK, and online with us is Priscilla Nyokabi, who is a commissioner with the National Gender and Equality Commission, looking at issues gender this morning and looking at the fight towards equal representation amongst genders. Priscilla, are we closer? It's not like it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago even. Are we close, or things are just as bad as they were before?
No, I think it's getting better with the distance that we have come. Sort of 10 years ago, I mean, there are women in Kenya who are in Beijing, and they are able to share what it was like during the Moi regime. And even I'm just, can I come in and just do it from the studio?
Go ahead, Priscilla. Yes.
Yeah. So 10 years ago, I think not even 10, 20 years ago, things were much more difficult. We just came from the Mount Kiloru Stadium Declaration, a lot of gender content in there. So things are getting better. And we're hoping that it even gets better than it has so far.
Yes. And so Caroline, what do you see? Obviously, you are not. You are aware of how it has been over time. You see a totally different situation now. What do you see? And moving forward,
the driver got lost.
For me, I think there has been improvement since we started talking about the gender composition in both elective and appointive bodies. I think we are getting better and we're getting somewhere. Like for the Law Society, I'm on record coming up with the sexual harassment and anti-bullying policy. I developed that when I convened the gender committee. So I can say that at the Law Society, we now have a safe and equal opportunity for everyone and a safe environment. For me, also, women empowerment. Any election is a very expensive process, whether it is a professional body election or otherwise. It's an extremely expensive affair. So we need resources. We need to empower ladies. We need to empower women. We need to take the courage, because the courage is the most important virtue. Because without it, we cannot exercise any other virtues consistently. So we need the courage. We need resources. For anyone to vie, you need money. the Law Society had tried to come up with regulations that will say will probably provide a platform that we don't need to travel. The branches will host debates and CPD seminars, but that was shut down. So it's still an expensive affair.
Why was it shut down?
Yeah.
At the AGM, members felt that we will let it be a free process, let members campaign the best way they know how. And having come from that process myself, I will assure you, if you don't have the means to traverse the country, convince members in the branches, those in Mombasa, those in Kisumu, whether if you're not able to afford, then it will be very difficult for you. So for me, we need to create equal opportunities. We need to come up with, especially in the professional bodies, strategies and ways that we can expose members to forums where they don't have to spend money to reach members.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, having this conversation, CT, we've talked about this many, many times, and you feel like, women should actually jump out and say, look, regardless of what has happened previously, I am going to come out and take this position. However you want to look at it, I'm putting up myself for election, and as opposed to waiting and saying, well, do me this favor because of the fact that I am a woman.
When you say do me a favor, you're actually referring to something called affirmative action. And affirmative action gets its relevance from the understanding that there are people, by virtue of either their gender distinction or ethnic distinction or linguistic distinction or religious belief, have been marginalized.
Yeah.
So in order to provide what could be an approximate semblance of balance, you have affirmative action. And what is certain about the 2/3 gender rule, in my opinion, it was affirmative action, because for the longest possible time, women were marginalized. There were many things that women simply were not allowed. It wasn't written down. Our cultures, the way we did things, and then our socialization. And ladies, on this note, since I'm the only gentleman here, I want to point out to the role of women in encouraging this marginalization of themselves. Because women are mothers of sons. And when you talk about men and the attitudes they have, we have to consider that the role that these mothers play in shaping the minds of these men.
Oh, absolutely important. And Priscilla, you're here with us.
Thank
It's like
you.
magic. We were on the
Thank
phone
you.
and then here you are. Voila. Thanks for making time to come in and continue the conversation with us. And I think that's a very important point here, because we even talking about women then voting in other women. There seems to be a disconnect there for the understanding that women can actually make a difference. Women are the ones who raise sons and in many cases propel the same narrative that we're trying to extinguish. How can that work in this whole sphere of things that seems to be so difficult to navigate?
Well, I think it starts early, and he speaks correctly about the issues of affirmative action. It starts from as early when you have a boy and a girl. When you buy a boy the car and a girl the doll, you are shaping their worldview. You are saying that you, girl, please play with the doll. That's your sphere. That's your domestic sphere. And you're saying to the boy, please dream and dream big about the cars that you want to drive. And so as mothers, it is indeed true. Even in inheritance. I mean, it's one thing for me not to have the land that my father has, but it's another thing for me not to give my daughter the land that I have acquired for myself, or the car or the shares that I have acquired for myself. And so there's a lot of socialization we have to deal with. Even in gender-based violence, it is mothers who tell you, enda uvumilie tu.
Or what did you do?
I know. What did you do? How did you cook the food? You know, now it gets back to you are the victim and you're also the one who made him slap you.
Yeah.
He didn't slap you because he wanted to slap you. He slapped you because you did something. And it's your mother who tells you, no, enda tu ndo ando ivo. Now, we mothers must change. We must allow our boys and girls to grow up the same. I had a mother who we had a duty rota for kuosha vyombo. Hiyo kuosha vyombo did not exempt the young men. Sister anaosha leo, brother anaosha kesho. Jikoni is not a no-go zone for any of the genders. When we went back to Nyeri, where the culture is a little bit more patriarchal, our brothers didn't even go to the kitchen. It was a revolution in our home. The first time we told my brothers, you eat your food, you take your plate to the kitchen. Why would I have to take your plate to the kitchen? You, please, take the plate to the kitchen.
Yeah.
Cook your own eggs, cook your own tea, clean for yourself. So that has got to be done. And it is only in that way that men and women will start to be equal. But for as long as culture brings us up as the ones to do traditional house roles and duties, and then the men to do something different, then it becomes very, very difficult later on. But it's a long-term process. The reason why us lawyers are running with the law is because that socialization will take us time. The generation of our mothers came some distance. Our generation will go. I mean, a lot of our mothers are, for example, not graduates. They went up to some level in school. They are able now to bring up daughters who are graduates. Then we have to keep this conversation moving forward so that our own daughters might have a different world. But we see the place of law, which is where Carol and I come in. Sometimes you let society change itself for many, many years, but sometimes you pass law for the society to get to that law. And that's what we want to do. Let's pass the 2/3 law. Let's put the formula in there. Let the society get to 2/3. And then as it continues to change and as these other measures are taking place, but the only problem is I told you it will take us long. So let's have the law, set the higher bar,
Priscilla,
and then have us rush to the law.
now that you're here, this matter that I mentioned, when talking to someone on the phone, there are things you say. When you see them face to face, there are things you now say.
No, me, I'm still dead set on the 2/3 law.
Open it up.
You see, there are two options here: to either comply with what we see in our electoral process, as in bribe voters, make sure you also insult back, or create a completely different platform. Because how else do you sell an idea? You represent the idea. I talked about conforming or understanding it, but understanding it also comes with understanding what you will not do. And if you do not do, there are very few politicians in this country, but they exist, who are known not to give handouts. They're known.
Yeah, our Mwai Kibaki president, I'm from Udaya, was well known for that.
No,
you vote him because you vote him for his development,
precisely.
Not for money.
No, he won't. And there are people. In fact, what you'll find surprising, very many leaders whose standard they are actually not known to give out money. They don't dish out money. They simply don't. Problem is they're few. Now, if you look at that culture, it tells you that people can actually be voted in without necessarily dishing out money. You don't need 10 examples. You need one to know it is possible. It took one lady to become a lawyer for people to realize, this thing can be done. If so-and-so can do it, so can we. That's how these things start out. But the journey to setting those new standards is harder than conforming. Are women prepared to take that road less traveled?
We're going to take a break and then we can come back and both of you to answer that question for Priscilla and Carolyn. Before we go and look at what the temperatures are with the weather, CT, remind us of today's proverb.
Today's proverb is a very simple one. And this is something that you ladies may also actually understand. What we're saying today is that you should use your tongue to count your teeth. That's the proverb.
We'll unpack that as we go along in the studio today with Priscilla Nyokabi and Caroline Kamende as we look at this gender debate and say, really, are we still talking or are we moving? Take a look at weather and be back in a bit. Mostly cloudy conditions in Nairobi at 18 degrees, highs of 26 today. In Nyeri at 19 degrees, it's mostly cloudy. It'll open up later on with highs of 26 and lows of 14. In Kisumu at 19 degrees, clear skies with rain later and highs of 29. 26 degrees in Malindi and mostly cloudy. Cloudy conditions are going to prevail with highs of 32 and lows of 26. It's cloudy conditions in Nakuru at 17 degrees. We see highs of 27. In Mombasa, cloudy conditions right now at 28 degrees, highs of 32. In Eldoret, cloudy conditions as well. Rain expected later with highs of 24 and lows of 13. On into East Africa, in Kampala, cloudy conditions at 23. Rain and thunderstorms expected later with highs of 27 and lows of 21. Dar es Salaam in Tanzania at 27 degrees, cloudy conditions, followed by by rain with highs of 31 and lows of 24. And finally, coming through to Lagos with 27 degrees. Rain expected with highs of 24 and lows of 27.
Spice FM, Nyeri. Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah!
You're listening to Spice FM. Welcome to Spice FM, the best exclusive radio station bringing you the best mix of the best music ever. Mature, intelligent talk every morning.
Kenya's biggest conversation in the Situation Room this morning. We are discussing gender issues and saying, in this fight, how far have we gone? Coming out to just before the break, CT, the question was, are you ready, really, to take on some of these things?
Well, there's always an alternative in these matters because, honestly, if you were to enter politics as it's currently constituted in this country, any sane person would not want to go into it. It requires and it takes too much from you. Because what you want to do is to represent. What you want to do is to actually see some change. But the cost. So the alternative is go with the flow or go against it.
Carolyn, are you ready to bear the cost in terms of what we see now? Take on that cost, take on that responsibility to see some kind of positive change?
Yes, I think also what we need to do, once you're elected to a position, you need to perform. You need to show members that they did not go wrong in electing you. Because it's also very hard to implement this gender rule through election and an election process. And I think this two-thirds gender rule has been litigated upon. There are orders, and those orders have not been implemented. I think it's time for, and I need to say also, this gender rule is not about women only. Like currently the Law Society as the council elect, it has more ladies than men. Are we then now saying that the men need to go to court? What I would say is that it's time for us, both genders, women and men, to take up the challenge. Once you are elected, members have voted you in confidence that you'll perform. Whether we're ladies or men, let us perform. Let us not disappoint them. Let us show them we are up to the task. And for me, we've come a long way since this two-thirds gender rule has been was breathed into life by the new constitution. We have had several bodies implementing it, especially Article 250.11, where it says that the chair and the vice chair should not be of the same gender. We have a long way to go, though, as Priscilla says. But for me, it's competence, performance. Let us show members that you elected me, I'm a woman, yes, but I can perform, I can deliver. Let us not give them, let us not give voters, whether they are from professional bodies or from the the normal mwananchi. Let us not give them reason to say that I'm not going to vote in another woman because this woman
Didn't
disappointed
perform.
me. Yeah, didn't perform.
Right.
Yes, for me, we are progressive and progressing well. Let us take up the challenge as leaders. Once we have been put in by members, let us perform.
As we wrap this up, Priscilla, is the result worth the cost?
It is worth the cost. That I would say anytime. And he spoke correctly about the cost of being elected in our politics. It is very high cost, but let me tell you, it is also really worth. I sat in as Vice Chair, Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, where we did the family laws. The family laws had been coming to Parliament since 1968. They had never been passed. The Marriage Act, the Matrimonial Property Act. We were using the Married Women's Property Act of England of 1882, with the Parliament since 1963. We were using the Married Women's Can you imagine that you go to court to litigate on Married Women's Property Act of England of 1882. So now it is only when the House had the women reps. It is only when the House had more women that we were able to pass these laws. The protection against domestic violence. And you know how much, our police never had a law around which to litigate domestic violence. And we were saying correctly, you run from the Al-Shabaab in the city to go and find a terrorist at home. It's also very wrong. I mean, you escape the real terrorist and then another terrorist is waiting for you in the house. So that protection of domestic violence, again, it took women. And I'm happy that Caroline has won, because even the lawyers are not easy to convince on gender matters. It took us a long, long time to convince the lawyers in the committee that these laws were important. We did the company's laws.
Was it just the men or the women?
We were only 4 women, so I think we didn't have the luxury of
Even
not being
convincing-
together.
Even
Yes.
convincing them.
The women didn't need to be convinced. They already knew about the situation. And men make these interesting arguments about the urban woman, the rural woman, as though there's a difference in the slap. I mean, if there's gender-based violence, there's gender-based violence in Karen, there's gender-based violence in Quebec. There's no difference in the pain.
Yeah.
So when the law needs to be passed, it must be passed for all women. It doesn't matter where the woman is crying from.
Yeah.
If you come to leadership, and she's going to see it, there will be places that will not be open for you. There are still Supreme Court judges and Court of Appeal judges and High Court judges who, when you make an argument, they kind of are not sure until a man makes the same argument that you made. If you're in a boardroom and you push a point, I tell you what, your point will not be taken until CT says, I support what Priscilla is saying. Now the point now we can canvass the point. So but the idea I was on myself is that the society is changing. It is worth the cost. We need more women to come into leadership. I've just given a small example about the women reps in Parliament. We had a fund, the National Government Affirmative Action Fund, which is 2 billion worth of money every year for supporting women, youth, and persons with disability. And the company's laws. We were using the company's laws of 1948, some very old laws. So it is worth. The price is worth. And when we come on to leadership, Caroline is right. We really must just prove ourselves.
And keep coming out.
We must just prove ourselves once we get the slot. The question on conforming is one that confronts the gender activists all the time. Do you conform or do you go the unbeaten path? Myself, I kind of wear my own shoes. Where it requires me to conform, I conform. Because if you don't conform, they won't even put you on the table.
Put you on the table.
Oh, you'll be thrown out. You and your untrodden path, get out of here. Go and trod elsewhere. Don't trod here. So if you're, for example, in a party situation and you want to get in and make a point in, say, like there's a meeting being arranged. I mean, for example, what we had in Kinoru, which was huge for Mount Kenya. We're going to give our declaration. You have to do a certain level of conformity for you to fit in with the space. And it also pays because once you are in the room, you now can no longer use the tactics that got you. Once you are in the room now, it is ideas. You have to just let your ideas compete with other people. So a bit of it is conformity. What is good? I mean, it's not that everything is wrong in our politics.
Right.
There are men who command space. I mean, I like, for example, how John Badi or Jacoyo Midiwo or Orengo argue. If you want to copy that and conform with that, nothing wrong. What you can say is, I draw the line at this point. I'm not going to give money because giving money is corruption as well. So once you go into the path of money, then it's a down. So we can choose what to pick from what is working and what to not
to leave
not
behind.
Pick. But at the end of the day, the country must make the decision that we need women in leadership, which is actually the right thing. Our development will never be wholesome for as long as a big part of the population is out of the game. And if you look at our national game right now, for example, you say who's calling the shots on processes like BBI and other national processes, you will find that those are male-led processes. The country needs the talents of its women. It needs the energy and the ability of its women. Once we agree that we need the women on the table, and we say that there is a problem in them getting elected in the national space, then we would not have a difficulty agreeing to quotas. Because once the women come, their talents, their energy, their skills, and remember that we are biologically wired differently. So we are a lot likely to look at health and water and alcoholism and other social problems, as opposed to the men who are likely to look at airports and highways and, you know, and the war in Somalia. Those are the things that occupy men. So we need both of them in the table so that our development can be wholesome. So if we need both at the table, and the election is not giving us the numbers that we need, we then must have a quota system until such a time as we reach the LSK level, until such a time as the election gives us the numbers that we need. When we get there, we will not be asking for affirmative action. But before we get there, affirmative action
is what is on the table.
Yeah, must stay on the table. And we are looking at Caroline. We also must reap from the benefits of having women in LSK. You know, LSK can play a very big role at national level.
At the national level.
At the proposals that they bring, at oversight and at other things. So we as women in the national space, I want to be looking at the women in the law society. How are they helping us in the debate to get more women? And I hear this debate about some few women get elected, like Martha Karua and Charity Ngilu and others. But those numbers are far too few. So I'm hoping that Caroline don't say that we are here, we were competent, we were very good in our in our campaigns, we got elected. So I mean, can't the other women just vie? Don't say that can't the other women just vie. There are also challenges out there.
There's a group of people in this country who also feel marginalized. It's called the youth.
Yeah, sure.
As we wrap this up, I want to give you an example of, there's a young gentleman called John Paul Mwirigi, MP for Igembe South. He was elected at the age of 23. Now, among the things this young man did, he didn't have money, was he looked at the results of the schools in the area he came from, and he went about ensuring that he provided schools with revision materials. What happened over a period that the results in that particular constituency changed drastically?
Through the roof.
And it was attributed to him.
Right.
I know I'm giving an example of a man, but I am saying if one is willing, you can be innovative enough. And you can bring about change that people resonate with, which doesn't involve you dishing out money.
No, we will. Let me just answer him quickly, because politics is a game of numbers, you know. So it is all very well to have John Paul Mwirigi, and we are happy about him. And it is all very well to have the women, but it is a game of numbers. We want women in numbers. So every time they tell us that we don't want one John Paul, we want 20 John Paul.
I'm only talking about numbers, because even the men who are successful in politics, the reason why they're successful is because many women vote for them.
Yeah. We'd like to continue this conversation, and of course the conversation continues, but at this point I have to let you both go and say thank you very much for being in the conversation in the Situation Room this morning. Caroline Kamende and Priscilla Nyokabi, asante sana. The conversation does continue. This is Kenya's biggest conversation right here in the Situation Room. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you too.
Spice FM, Nakuru. Intelligent humor and nostalgic music.
If you wanna be with me, baby, there's a price to pay. Tell me why ain't nothing but a ball.
Yes, that's part of the show.
94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
This is Kenya's biggest conversation. It continues this morning, and as we've been discussing issues, we now shift gears a little bit and look at other issues that are taking storm in the nation right now. And I'm going to hand this one right over to you, CT.
The Kenya Medical Practitioners and Dentists Board have had a discussion with their counterparts in Parliament who oversee health matters. And the debate has been about affordable healthcare. In 2006, I'm glad we have our legal and learned friends who are now departing, but they would understand that there were certain legislative issues that were set in motion, and there's a discussion that's ongoing. We thank you for coming, and we will invite you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now I won't miss the turning.
Thank you. Thank you. And you get well soon. Yes. Now, the problem was the cost of healthcare. The issue was, what is a minimum charge that should be levied for consultation? What is a minimum charge that should be levied for operations? What is the minimum charge that one can expect to pay for medical services? And the revision of this particular, should we say, I wouldn't call it a ruling, came about and the discussion began in 2016 again. But those who looked at the suggestions and what was amended found it exorbitant. The insurance industry complained about it. The union that handles matters to do with doctors argued against it. They said it was unaffordable. They called it exploitative. Now, these aren't the people who were partaking of it directly, as you call them wananchi, but people who ought to know. And in fact, the insurance industry, and I'm now quoting a gentleman by the name of William Kiama, who comes from the Association of Kenyan Insurers, he says that if these fees continue to go up, the number of Kenyans able to subscribe to healthcare insurance will further plummet, meaning they were already low, but they'll plummet even further. In essence, they were saying that healthcare was going to be completely unaffordable to those who will seek it. This very week, we had a headline of a lady who appeared in our papers, and for one simple reason. She was actually paying for a debt that was owed to a healthcare facility, a debt that was accumulated because she had a child who was unwell in hospital. Unfortunately, the child passed away. Now, the question that one then asks is, do you still pay for a debt that you owe because you sought care but the person then died? Now, this lady, what is odd is she's paying the tune of 20,000 shillings a month. And to be able to clear the debt, she needs to pay for a period of, say, 50 years.
Yeah.
I know when you hear it, it sounds ridiculous. Yet, healthcare does have a cost to it. And yet, healthcare must be paid for by someone because it has a cost. Whatever you need to have that healthcare is bought by the health facility. How do you bring about a judicial parity? Something that ensures that it is just and that the healthcare seeking behavior is actually gotten but in a fair and just manner. Because to take the side of people who say they have suffered from it is right in that people have. If there are no controls, then anything goes. It just becomes not a healthcare service, it becomes a business that provides healthcare. So it follows business principles, and the ethics that are supposed to go with healthcare don't follow closely behind. It's an ongoing debate, but the thing that must be said is that it is not something that is outside the grasp of our legislators or outside the grasp of people who make decisions on healthcare issues. The back and forth has been ministry taking it back to parliament, parliament taking it back to ministry. But this is somewhere where the medical associations can wade in because they are the ones who represent the various disciplines within the medical fraternity.
So we're looking at fees having to come down so that people can afford them and we don't get into situations that we see the unfortunate situation of something having to pay probably easily for the rest of her life over the health of a child who is no more. I will come back and continue with this. We're going to look at the situation on the roads, look at traffic, and then come back and continue with this discussion. The phone lines will be open when we do come back. This is Kenya's biggest conversation, now looking at health matters and the cost of healthcare in Kenya.
Spice FM, Nakuru. Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and
On the
nostalgia.
roads now, coming off Mombasa Road, not as bad as it was before, now moving smoothly. We still had the situation on the northern bypass where there was an accident, but that seems to have been cleared up now. People still moving cautiously in the area. Gashie to Waiyaki Way bypass 5 minutes ago was an absolute mess, and using the 87 is a way to get round things. There's construction that's going on Gong Road this will definitely add to the traffic situation that we see. So around the city, things seem to have calmed down as far as traffic is concerned. If there's anything out of the ordinary, do let us know. As we said, already it was 4, but now 8 accidents having taken place in the city in different places today. Need to move a little bit slower because the roads are still slippery. Anything else out of the ordinary, do let us know. 0719-012-600 or reach us on Spice FM KE. Give us a shout and we will see how we can make sure people keep moving.
Are you ready? Okay.
Spice FM. Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
This is Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. Continuing then with the question, CT, as we go through this now, what are we basically asking for? That negotiations need to be made for lowered premiums on healthcare?
Yes, in fact, suggestions were made that they should be lowered by 20%. The committee that deals with health in Parliament is actually called the National Assembly Departmental Committee on Health. This was one of their suggestions.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to understand the figures that we're talking about, for instance, okay, general surgeries, the range that the general public deals with is from something like 60 to 66,000 to 32,000. The maximum should be 60 to maybe 80,000. Now, even the figures as I mentioned them, I'm not talking about something even more complicated like surgery, that what you call urological surgeries, things which are a little more complicated. These ones are figures that do the rounds of something like 360,000. Now tell me, the figures alone, if you had a condition that requires that amount of money, are you going to eat? Are you going to pay rent? Are children going to go to school? Or are you going to seek medical care? Now, it's a debate that's worth having, because if you look at lawyers, they have something they call the Advocates Remuneration Order, last revised in 2014. I'm not sure the doctors have something that is equivalent.
To the same.
Yes, because this is a guideline. And if you ask someone, why are you charging, they will say, look, this is how we go about making our charges. This is what we determine. But this has been, and this is something that only the doctors themselves, in compliance with the laws as we currently have them, can come about and tell us that this is the guideline that the general public should have. So that even as you go to a doctor, you would need to understand that these are the possible charges that you will be required to pay. But as we speak now, I don't think, or I don't have knowledge of the existence of such an order that guides me as to what seeking medical care would actually cost.
The question then for many people that even in the business of healthcare in that sector, medical facilities, hospitals, private, whatever it is that you want to look at, go into this for business.
It is a business.
They go into it
is
profit seeking,
it
right?
is.
So the likelihood of them coming in to have a conversation about then, okay, let's reduce premiums in order to take care of the citizens is something that they're probably not going to go into with open arms. They're not looking to go at a loss. They're looking to make some money.
They should. But you can make it fairly, meaning there can be a decent profit to be made without it sounding exploitative. Because why people call it exploitative is because they do the maths. You are trained to perform this surgery. You're trained to offer this medical advice. You're trained to ensure that you give advice that will guarantee this individual who comes to you seeking health care will actually get health care. You're trained already. But again, when you want to make profit, this is the question you must ask yourself, given the peculiar nature of healthcare. There is an ethical matter attached to it. At what point do the charges start becoming exploitative? At what point do they start becoming unethical?
Yeah, because in this case, if you look at this lady, if this one example that we have, somebody is going to have to pay 20,000 shillings for the next 58 years.
And
right?
that's what she
and
could
her
afford
child,
to, and that's what she
and
could
this is what she could afford to pay.
Her name is actually Damaris Makimei.
And her child, unfortunately, is no more.
Yes.
So she's paying for something that she will never be able to see the results of ever, apart from
Yes.
the label of debt having been removed from her. This is the only benefit that she will receive from paying this money. So now the question then comes in, where do we draw the line between now profit seeking and then ethical standards where people are actually being protected? Because if they want to look at their books, they're going to tell you they expensed this medical services, they gave medicine, they did whatever they needed to do, they had this child in hospital, and then, okay,
Let's give a bad
unfortunately the child passed.
Let me refer to a bad example, all right? We've talked about fintech companies, and one of the things that people bring up is that their interest rates are high. But people still use those services. Why? Because they find them useful. And so they can live with the charges, even if it probably gets them into trouble, but they consider getting into trouble a far, far more accommodatable issue than not having the means to sort out the problem at the time when they have it. In the same way, people will postpone healthcare. So in short, people who ordinarily would not have to deal with expensive conditions, you see, the postponement simply exacerbates the condition, if you already have it, yes. But the fear of being told something you can't afford will prevent them from even seeking to find out what it would cost. Now, government hospitals, by their very nature, provide these services until we introduce something called cost sharing. It was understandable. And if you look at even many government hospitals, if not all, by the way, they all make money. They do. They collect revenue.
Yes, they do.
They do. And if they are well administered and they're provided for and well equipped, they provide these very services. But the debate comes in here, in that one, public hospitals, by virtue of the fact that they're public and they are affordable, many people will go there. But because people prefer to have what they consider better healthcare, they go to private practitioners who are business people providing healthcare. Yes. Now, you can't stop someone from starting a business, and you also can't stop them from making money from it. I don't think it is the making money. By the time insurers are complaining, you see what they're saying is this, if you make this thing expensive, it means we also have to make our charges for providing this cover expensive. So we will essentially be making it inaccessible to very many people. So it becomes an unviable business for the insurance people. That's the complaint they're saying. Because we are also business. So the insurance companies need to agree, the government needs to aid in, the various associations of those in medical health need to agree. There needs to be an understanding of what is considered equitable, so that people make reasonable profit, but at the same time, the general public also benefits.
The part about the commercial viability of this for many of these facilities then comes into question and then comes into play. And I think that is now when you have a lot of insurance companies then who would come in and say, well, okay, we're going to take the burden and say, we'll provide this insurance for you so that you can make it. Unfortunately, still, many people are not able to afford it. The question then comes in then, is it fair that here, with this loss of life that has happened with, here, as one example, and I'm sure there are very, very many cases where people continue to pay even after, a death has occurred. They still continue to pay. The question then comes in that, then is it fair to make them continually pay even when life has been lost?
One of the things you do when you go to a hospital, you sign certain forms. Sometimes you're in such a state of distress, you don't actually read what it is you're signing. It's like someone taking a loan and signing, you'll sign here, sign here, sign here. And then when they say it's in fine print, man, those prints are small.
That you actually don't.
Oh, yes.
That you actually don't read.
No, people don't bother reading. Even if you're told to read it, you wouldn't read it because you're more concerned about receiving the loan. But where the problem arises is not with the loan. The problem arises is with the so-called fine print. When you're unable to pay and you don't understand the terms on which you can either negotiate or restructure, you don't understand because you didn't bother to probably ask. And the people didn't bother to explain to you. If you've been provided, a service has been provided for, you indemnify the institution by saying you will pay. You've signed, you will pay. So legally, they're not wrong. the moral issue here is that should you pay a debt when somebody has passed away? Now, that debate, in my opinion, should actually go beyond that particular discussion. It should say, how do you indemnify someone who has suffered loss despite the health care?
We'll open up the phone lines at 0719-012-600 as we take a break now and look into this and say, really, when someone's life has essentially been lost, do we need to then hold them ransom with the cases that we see rampant and say, yeah, you should still pay the bill because while you were alive, this is what you racked up in terms of cash? This is Kenya's biggest conversation. We'll take a break now and come back and listen to what you might have to say to us.
Welcome to Spice FM, the best exclusive radio station bringing you the best mix of the best music ever. Breathing life into the 90s.
Everybody, what's up?
94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Kenya's biggest conversation. We'll open up the phone lines on 0719-012-600. Do you think it's actually fair when we see life has been lost, but there's a huge bill that has been racked up at, any medical facility, and say the bill still needs to be paid, whether this person, unfortunately died or not? You almost seem afraid to say it, that, we're still going to ask you to pay the price. But these are commercial entities, and they're saying, we need to meet our targets. We need to meet our overheads. We need to make sure that is in line. So unfortunately, whether someone has died or not while they were alive, this bill was racked up. It needs to be paid. It's a debt.
It's a debt
that needs to be paid.
Yes.
Right. So then where do the morals jump into this? So where do the ethics? Where is it ethical or not?
It's a consideration. It's a consideration that I think if I know that government hospitals have a facility for a waiver, meaning there will be a social worker within many government hospitals, if not all, whose task is to understand the economic capacity or the financial capacity of the patients. Because you can tell that this person is having difficulties paying. And if you've accumulated a certain debt, there's a committee that will probably sit and talk about it, but they can waiver. They can decide, no, let's write this off. If you consider that private hospitals are businesses and it's a debt, they may probably have, I don't know for sure if they do, the capacity to write off the debt. Like any business, if it understands that it is not possible for us to actually get this thing repaid, they will write it off. They could. And they probably have conditions. But it's not, I doubt very much, even if they had this, there's something they would advertise. Because essentially,
no, I don't think it's something you want to tell everybody, because everybody would have a reason as to why they were not able to pay something. And then you essentially go out at a complete loss.
Yes.
Yeah.
But then also remember that there is this misconception from many Kenyans that private hospitals provide better health care. It's not true. In fact, it's not true at all. If you look at a referral hospitals, or the referral hospitals we have Kenyatta, we have Moi, and now we have Kenyatta University. Remember, these are training hospitals because the hospitals are attached to the university where staff, medical personnel are trained. So, and throughout the training at a certain stage, they are part and parcel of the caregivers within those facilities. And they're trained. And their training and the practice of it, or the practicums, have oversight of the people who teach them. So you're actually saying that you're talking about a group of a people or a specific place where you are likely to get the most thorough care. And you're also likely to have people who are really well trained.
It might be interesting to hear then from somebody who went through this unfortunate process and then find out then how they feel about what they should pay. And we actually have Damaris Makime on the line right now. She's going to tell us about what that experience was. Damaris, good morning. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, Damaris. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Fine, thank
You're
you.
well, thank you.
With Ndu and a CT in the studio this morning, and of course, the country read your story, and we wanted to find out from you exactly what happened in this case now, where you have to pay for quite some time medical bills.
I got my baby. My baby came in when I was expecting. I had a condition called preeclampsia. So I could not be able to carry my pregnancy to term. I got my baby at 25 weeks, which is classified as an extreme preterm. And due to the fact that the baby was born extremely early, he was a delicate baby.
Yes.
And had to stay at the ICU for close to 7 months. He actually stayed for 7 months. And the long stay at ICU came with a very high bill.
Yes.
And it was hard to even transfer the baby. You see, once you're in ICU, it becomes complicated. And my baby was extremely tiny. My baby was born at 720 grams.
Right. So you say you were in ICU for 7 months?
Yes.
Okay.
He was in ICU for 7 months. So that made my price, my hospital bill, go really high. It got to 19 million, and by the time it was getting to 19 million, along the way, at around 4 or 5 months, the hospital realized I was struggling, and I was struggling complete, and it was a real struggle because I started raising red flags from 3 million. I started saying, I cannot afford to pay this bill.
Yes.
I don't know how I'm going to be helped. So at around either 5 months or 4 months there, they reduced the billing from neonatal ICU to high dependence unit, though they didn't reduce the care because my baby's care needed to be intensive care.
Yes.
So the cost came down from maybe charging like almost 80,000 per day to almost 40,000 per day. So it kind of slowed the bill, but you see, when you're paying 40,000 per day and you're there for the next like 2 months, it's still a lot.
Right.
So by the end of the day, by the time my baby was passing on, my bill had gone almost to 19 million. It was 18 million, and I have the papers that can be able to show you my bill.
And did you have any kind of insurance during this time?
You see, my baby was a preterm, and most insurance companies are not ready to cover for preterm babies.
On the case of
existing
conditions.
They're very sensitive. Yes, they're very sensitive. Some of them might have lifetime issues that they wait until the baby gets to full term. That's when they start covering.
Right.
So the only cover that I got was NHIF.
Yes. Did it help in any way to put a dent in this high amount?
Yes. NHIF paid 700,000. Yes. And over and above that 700,000 was inclusive of I had a pre-authorization surgery that NHIF catered for.
All right. So then you made
and hernia repair in renal surgery.
Right. So you made an agreement with the hospital, with the facility. After, unfortunately, and again, sorry for this loss, but you made an agreement with the hospital to then pay in installments, and this is what you said you could afford, or what they asked you to pay?
No, initially what I could afford. By the time we were coming up with this figure, remember the time that I had my baby had passed on, and I needed to lay my baby to rest. So we went round. We did calculations with them. I said I can comfortably be able to pay 10,000 per month. From their end, they said 10,000. If we do the calculation, it isn't reasonable. It will be so many more years. So you need to push yourself more. And I told them I'll push myself more. I'll try to see whether I can be able to get 20, but I cannot guarantee.
Yeah.
They told me, but my employer had to do a letter commit that we will be paying.
And that is right. And that is what you're currently paying now.
I have not even started
You
because
have
I
not
have
begun.
to organize my finances. This is the first month I paid. I paid 25,000, and it was through the help of my friends. It's not my money that I paid. It's my friends who came together, contributed, and I was able to make the first payment. At 20,000, I've made an earlier payment of like 8,000 as I try to reorganize myself.
Okay.
So that I'm able to.
Damaris, how exactly do you feel about this whole situation?
It's it's very complicated because I saw my baby suffer. I saw the effort that the hospital put, but on the other hand, the billing is crazy.
Right.
I wish our government would be able to do. I wish our government would even be able to put one thing, the health in place, because it's not something that is doable. If you look at other countries, they're able to comfortably cater for without discrimination that this is a preterm baby, so we will not be able to be taking. There is no discrimination when it comes to care that is given. And unfortunately, when you live in Kenya, you have to bear the burden. And it's not out of choice.
It's not out of choice. Definitely something needs to be done about that. Definitely.
I wish our government would do more because in most cases you'll find most of the deaths that happen, they are deaths that can be prevented.
Right.
But due to the fact that
people don't
our health system is
weak.
Yes.
Right. Thank you for sharing this information with us, Damaris. Again, serious, big commiserations for what you've had to go through. And thank you for talking to us this morning.
Thank you.
Well, a tough situation to go through, but shining light again on the fact that we still need to be talking about these things to see what we can do to change the situation or make it a little bit better for the people who unfortunately have to suffer.
Essentially, what she's saying is the government should use their tongue to count their teeth. Yes. Meaning, they need to understand their people, they know their means, and they should act accordingly. Meaning, you have a problem. Damaris isn't the only Kenyan who faces this sort of problem. Why must someone go through a double tragedy? Your child is born preterm, you yourself have a complication. You then have this bill, then the child passes away. It's a burden upon a burden.
Right. So if we're unpackaging the proverb for today, CT, in light of all that we've talked about and all that we've seen and experienced, how would you unpack that?
Essentially, know your means. Figure it out. The mouth and the tongue are in the same space. And you can go about the process of moving your tongue along the lines of your teeth quietly without anybody knowing it. But you will know if you are studious enough to know just how many teeth are still there and how many you've lost. As I said, I'm aware of the ones I've lost. You need to be able to understand the circumstances that you find yourself in and be able to act accordingly given the needs of the time and given the availability that you have at your disposal. Yes.
The conversation continues. We will be with you again tomorrow. We're coming around to 10 o'clock. So much to talk about, so little time to do it. This has been Kenya's biggest conversation for this Thursday, the 5th of March. And we will be with you again tomorrow. But for now, CT, we have to say goodbye, no?
Yes, we do. And may the conversation continue.
Yes. Enjoy Spice Soul after 10 o'clock and then Spice Drive from 3 as you then connect with the adults in the room from 7 o'clock to 10 o'clock. This is the Situation Room. We've had a good time with you today and we will continue again tomorrow as we keep talking issues that matter and make a difference. From now until 3, enjoy Spice Soul, some of the oldies yet goodies from way back when. We'll talk with you again tomorrow morning from 10 o'clock, or rather from 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock and look into more issues affecting us.